Story 1.
After catching my wife cheating, she proposed an open marriage, but I ghosted her and moved on. As a child and teenager, I was your typical not very sporty type. Despite participating in cross-country, I never earned any awards or respect from my peers in athletics. My grades were average because I believed I had average intelligence and motivation. I had an ordinary number of friends, both male and female, and lived in a standard house with my family. Even my name, Common Joe Johnson, reflected my unexceptional nature. None of us, not even my family, could have anticipated that someone as average as me would have two revelations, but it happened. The first came when I was 14. I came across an article discussing the stark differences between genius and utter incompetence. It featured Bobby Fischer, arguably America's greatest chess grandmaster, and suddenly I became intrigued by chess. Despite always considering myself of average intelligence, I discovered I was actually quite sharp and intuitive when it came to the game. I devoured everything I could find on chess strategy and joined the school chess club. I started competing in local tournaments, first with my junior school, then at a summer camp. Long story short, by the time I turned 18 and reached senior year in high school, I was truly exceptional. In fact, I was so skilled at chess that I earned a scholarship to college. Most people probably aren't aware that there are several dozen colleges in the United States offering full chess scholarships. So despite my grades hovering just above average, chess helped me excel in certain subjects, particularly math. I secured a full scholarship to a respectable college. Believe it or not, there are indeed chess fans out there, or something akin to that. My fame in my hometown, thanks to my prowess in chess, even led to some girls from school in nearby areas getting to know me. One of these encounters, just a few months after my 18th birthday, sparked my second revelation. Her name was Denise, and she attended the local Catholic girls' school. She wasn't particularly stunning, much like any of the chess fans I'd encountered, yet she wasn't unattractive either. In fact, what caught my attention were her incredibly beautiful legs, which I noticed during a gymnastics competition at the same camp where I taught chess the summer before her senior year. Although I took a liking to her during camp, I refrained from making a move until the school year began. Throughout the academic term, I found myself in situations with Denise that seemed planned. As I debated whether to reciprocate her attention, my hormones began to stir. Over the next few weeks, or perhaps months, my voice deepened and my appearance subtly changed. During a Saturday's away rapid chess tournament, Denise coincidentally found herself nearby after my easy victory. I didn't even have to play the final match. She kindly offered me a ride home, which I accepted, informing my coach and companions that I'd see them on Monday. During the ride back, Denise's flirtation escalated, including a playful gesture of lifting her skirt almost to her underwear as she drove. As I mentioned, her legs were quite striking. Later that evening, I agreed to pick her up for a movie date, and we shared a sweet kiss before parting ways. I hoped it might be a lucky night, but it exceeded my expectations. When I arrived at Denise's house, she was dressed more provocatively than I anticipated for a movie. That's when I learned her parents wouldn't be home for at least 4 hours. Without delay, she kissed me, and the chemistry was immediate. Although I was a virgin, it was clear Denise was not. Before long, we found ourselves undressed. Once again, to cut a long story short, that evening marked my first lovemaking experience. Despite her efforts to reignite the passion for a second round, I fell short. Nonetheless, we enjoyed some carnal pillow talk, and I discovered a newfound pleasure in caressing and kissing her. When I left Denise's house 3.5 hours later, she extracted a promise from me that we would meet again, the most fervent promise I had ever made in my life. While Denise assured me that I'd filled her with the same fervor and curiosity I had previously reserved for chess, I resolved to become an unparalleled lover. Ultimately, I realized that my relationship with Denise wouldn't last long-term. I knew I'd be competing with more conventionally attractive men, therefore I needed an advantage. When Denise hailed me as the ultimate mating god and unabashedly declared that despite seeing other men I was far superior, I knew I had to aim higher. I began seeking new opportunities. Denise and I didn't truly love each other. Despite engaging in sex almost 3 times a week, we lacked emotional connection. She wanted to continue our casual arrangement into college, but fortunately her parents wouldn't fund her education, unlike my scholarship. Thus, we parted ways at summer's end. During my college years, Denise and I only occasionally dated during summer breaks. Although our time together was enjoyable, and she deemed me even more skilled than in high school, I was already seeking a committed, loving relationship. I was disappointed by the lack of female enthusiasts in college. Moreover, competition for attractive partners was fierce, particularly as I didn't fit the typical stud stereotype. Despite lacking prominent muscles, top-tier looks, wealth, or irresistible charm, I compensated with determination and ambition. Although I had my fair share of satisfying love-making experiences during my first 2 college years, the women I engaged with weren't exceptionally beautiful, nor did they flaunt our liaisons. While many hoped for our relationship to continue, I became increasingly interested in finding a girlfriend or potential wife, rather than a casual fling. Towards the end of my junior year, I decided to execute a plan I had been preparing for months. The woman I desired, Dolores, was incredibly attractive. Despite doubts about my chances, given her other suitors, I believed impressing her with my love-making prowess was my best shot. However, Dolores had a friend and sorority sister named Bernice, who was more accessible and gossipy. Though not as unattainably attractive as Dolores, Bernice caught my attention. We crossed paths through mutual friends and shared classes during my junior year's first semester. Fortune smiled upon me when I encountered Bernice at an outdoor party, embroiled in a public spat with her intoxicated date. Sensing an opportunity, I intervened and offered her a ride home, which she accepted gratefully. In her drunken state, she repeatedly bumped into me on the way to the car. In line with her uninhibited demeanor, fueled by drinks, she broached several provocative subjects during our journey to her apartment. One topic stood out, catching me off guard. It went something like this. "Remember that girl who mentioned your remarkable hidden talents? Was she exaggerating, or are you truly exceptional?" "I'm not sure who you mean," I replied with a smile, genuinely surprised as I didn't recall any of my acquaintances discussing me with other girls. Maybe Melissa, or Miranda, or someone similar. She was heavily intoxicated at a party where I stumbled upon her, berating a guy for not being even a fraction as good as Joe Johnson. "Perhaps it was another Joe Johnson," I suggested with a broad, toothy grin, piquing her interest. To cut a long story short, I demonstrated my abilities to Bernice that night before she drifted off. The next day, Bernice showed up at my dorm room, essentially booting out my neighbor. In her laid-back style, she stated, "We had quite a night before I fell asleep, or was it a dream?" "Seems like there's something there," she smiled. "I'm curious if it's real. Can you come over tomorrow night and repeat it while I'm sober?" "I'm not sure, Bernice. I like you, but I'm not looking for a serious relationship, and I don't want any misconceptions. Plus, if I decide to date one of your sorority sisters, I don't want you getting attached or her rejecting me because of our encounter." "Listen, dummy," she scoffed. "I'm not interested in a relationship either, and I won't stand in your way if you pursue one of my sisters. I just want to see if sober mating with you matches up to my foggy memory." "What time should I come over tomorrow?" I asked with a wide grin. "At 8, but I have a test the next day, so you'll have to leave by 10 if you last that long." She chuckled devilishly. The following day, I rushed to complete my schoolwork, grabbed an early dinner and did some language exercises. This was my chance to catch Dolores's attention, and I didn't want to miss it. I arrived at Bernice's at 8 in the evening. When she greeted me, I took charge, passionately kissing her, ensuring she noticed my muscular tongue, over 8.5 centimeters long with a pointed tip, and swept her into the bedroom. I approached with intensity, not bothering to undress her or myself. I exerted myself as I had never before. Afterward, I held her close, then dressed, left her a note, and departed. Despite it not aligning perfectly with my plan, I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. She was as supportive and appreciative a partner as I've ever had. The next day, while chatting with friends in the student union, Bernice approached, looking disheveled and agitated. Walking on her tiptoes, an unusual sight. She dismissed the 3 friends I was with and settled next to me. "Thanks to you, I failed my world history test today," she began, her tone far from cheerful. "Did she say something similar last night?" I inquired. "I mentioned I needed to study for my test, but you still persisted." "No, damn it, I couldn't stop," she replied. "By the way, mating with you is quite something." Bernice smiled, then chuckled. "When can we do it again? Friday or Saturday night, just not when I have classes the next morning." "Why not both Friday and Saturday?" I suggested. Bernice pondered for a moment. "Friday for sure, and I'll try to rearrange my plans for Saturday." I crashed at her place one Friday night and discovered that given the right conditions, it takes me about 5 hours to recharge. So, I ended up getting carnal not only on Friday night but also early Saturday morning. Thankfully, I didn't have much to do on Saturday during the day, as I needed to catch up on sleep to recover and prep for Saturday night, which pretty much mirrored Friday night until around 3 Sunday morning. We had to call it quits eventually. In the following week, I noticed more smiles from attractive women when I passed by on breaks or during class than I ever had before, and among them was Dolores. After 3 more lengthy sessions with Bernice over 3 weekends and continued attention from women across campus, we had a serious talk before another Friday rendezvous. We sat down on a bench in a secluded area of campus. "Joe, I have something to tell you that you might not like. Since I've been so preoccupied with our physical relationship, I'm managing to get multiple BS this semester for the first time." "Have you never received a B in college?" I inquired, quite surprised. I knew Bernice was intelligent, but considering her personality and lovemaking activities, I never imagined she would make the dean's honor list. College is beside the point. I've never gotten a B in my entire life. Despite my promiscuity, I'm a dedicated student and aim to graduate with honors, so I need to dial it back with you. I'm just a session or two away from graduating while I'm working on improving my grades in world history and astronomy. Astronomy was known as one of the toughest subjects in the School of Liberal Arts. I was surprised she even took it, let alone planned to ace it. "Now that we're being honest, Bernice, let me tell you what I want. I want a relationship with Dolores McHugh. I want you to help set us up. If you do this, I'll gladly go on 2 more dates with you because that's all there'll be before the end of the semester. At a time and place of your choosing. Otherwise, we're finished right now." "You're quite the little extortionist," she chuckled. "Not extortion, just negotiation," I smirked. 5 days later, Bernice and I reconvened on the same bench. "You've really thrown a wrench in my life, idiot," she grumbled, though by now I knew her well enough to recognize the grumble as fake. "Like this?" I teased. "I set you up with a date with Dolores at the cost of my conscience and pride." "That's the deal." She snorted again. "How do I not understand?" I quipped this time with a grin. "I stirred up trouble between her and that idiot football player she's dating. Told her that you've worn me out so much that if she wants to let loose and just have fantastic mating, she should go on a date with you. How do I suddenly ask her out on a date out of nowhere? I'm even nervous about it. I took care of that too. Told her I had plans with you at an off-campus dance party on Saturday night, and that we agreed you'd pick me up at the sorority house. I mentioned that when you arrived, I'd stage a family emergency. She'll be nearby, and if you look disappointed, she'll offer to go in my place. I even got you tickets to the dance party." "You're unbelievable," Bernice said with a grin, pulling out 2 tickets from her bag. I pocketed the tickets and gave her a passionate kiss. "Let me know when you're ready to be swept off your feet, and I'll make it happen," I grinned. "You've already made my days, but I just want 2 more 2-hour sessions at most with you. I'll give you the dates, and you'll show up even if you have plans with Dolores. Agreed?" "Agreed," she laughed. The initial phase of the date with Dolores proceeded smoothly. Bernice skillfully unfolded a narrative about family concerns, and I feigned sympathy as she became emotional. Meanwhile, Dolores walked by, looking impeccably groomed despite her relaxed outfit. Bernice intervened to help her, and I inquired if Dolores intended to leave, expressing concern about wasting pricey tickets. Dolores agreed to stay but mentioned the need to change. In a mere 4 minutes, she reappeared, dressed flawlessly for the dance party. During our journey to the dance, Dolores and I engaged in pleasant conversation. She was not only delightful to talk to, but also stunningly attractive and captivating, like no other woman I'd seen. The dance itself was enjoyable. Both of us were skilled dancers, and we encountered acquaintances. Despite not drinking much, Dolores appeared somewhat tipsy upon leaving. I suspected her tipsiness was an act, a suspicion confirmed on our return to campus. Dolores undid her seatbelt and leaned towards me. "Joe, you wouldn't exploit a vulnerable, intoxicated girl, would you?" she slurred. "No, Dolores. Plus, even if I were inclined, logistics wouldn't allow it with our dorms," I reassured her. "Thankfully, you're not boring," she slurred even more. "Because Bernice left town on family business and gave me her apartment key. Can we swing by briefly so I can feed her cat?" I knew Bernice didn't own a cat. Of course, I agreed and promptly drove to Bernice's place. Dolores struggled with the key, unable to insert it, and eventually handed it to me, saying, "Try it." "I'm too drunk." I opened the door, and she wandered around calling for the non-existent cat until she accidentally bumped into me. Seizing the moment, I kissed her, which she reciprocated. "I'm helpless, I can't resist you. Please don't take advantage," she murmured, clearly inviting me. Lifting her up, while she continued kissing me, I gently placed her on Bernice's bed, which was thoughtfully prepared with clean sheets for the occasion. I proceeded to remove her underwear without any resistance. In the peaceful aftermath, while we lay together on Bernice's bed, a realization struck me. It had been the most satisfying lovemaking experience of my life. Upon reaching her sister's residence, before getting out of the car, she turned to me and expressed that it had been the best lovemaking experience of her life. She also mentioned her genuine fondness for me and wondered if there was potential for a relationship. I responded affirmatively with a playful grin. I might have continued with playful comparisons, but she interrupted me, indicating she understood my sentiments. She then mentioned picking her up at 7 on Tuesday evening for a student concert, and hinted at the possibility of more before giggling and closing the door. As the car door shut, she waved and hurried up the steps of the women's house, suggesting she might have overheard my confirmation. Things went remarkably well with Dolores, surpassing my expectations. By the time summer arrived, we had engaged in closeness in 10 different locations on campus, spent 3 nights in motel rooms, and an additional night at Bernice's apartment. I remained devoted solely to Dolores, fulfilling my promise to Bernice for 2 more encounters before college graduation. Expressing gratitude to Bernice, I wholeheartedly engaged in both occasions despite feeling guilty for straying from Dolores, even though we hadn't committed to exclusivity. Bernice's success was evident as she graduated as the top student of the School of Arts and Sciences. In appreciation, I gifted her a Mont Blanc pen in an engraved holder with a message thanking her for her intelligence, selflessness, and allure. Upon receiving the gift, Bernice became emotional, shedding tears and embracing me. Wiping away a tear, she inquired about the likelihood of future encounters, given her proximity while I was with Dolores. With a grin, I assured her it was unlikely but promised to always remember her. Chuckling, she kissed me and departed to meet her parents for the summer. Throughout my 3rd and 4th years, I remained exclusive to Dolores. I spent 2 weekends at Dolores's lavish mansion while her parents were in Europe, and she visited my parents' modest home once, necessitating a motel stay for privacy. During my senior year, I declined a chess scholarship and worked part-time, accumulating enough funds from summer jobs and winning professional chess tournaments to easily cover my senior year's tuition. This financial stability was also facilitated by renting an apartment with Dolores, funded by her parents, while I shared food expenses and covered most of our social outings. It wasn't until visiting Dolores's parents' mansion that I realized their considerable wealth. Despite lavishing Dolores with material possessions, her parents lacked emotional involvement in her life, visiting only once during our senior year, prompting me to hide my belongings during their brief stay. Introducing me as her boyfriend, they remained distant towards me. However, their aloofness was the only issue during Dolores's senior year. In fact, our closeness and affection for each other only deepened. We professed our love daily and enjoyed carnal moments nearly every day outside her menstrual cycle, spending almost every weekend in pure bliss. There were a couple of minor issues. Firstly, she had a tendency to splurge her parents' money on clothes, cosmetics, spa treatments, and whatever else she desired. Secondly, if she indulged in drinks, she would often boast to her friends, sometimes in my presence, about my prowess in bed. I hoped she wouldn't do the latter, as it would imply to them why a goddess like her would be with a guy like me, who she might consider out of her league in terms of looks. When I brought this up with her, she reassured me that wasn't the case. However, this led to many of her friends giving me curious or cautious looks, which made me uncomfortable. The natural progression of our relationship led to our wedding, which took place 2 months after we graduated from university, having both secured decent jobs in the same city. It was a simple civil ceremony since her parents declined to participate, viewing me as beneath her, particularly because I wasn't extremely wealthy, and she rejected their attempts to set her up with affluent suitors. At least her brothers attended the reception. Anthony was a wonderful person, while Jonathan appeared to be troubled by the event. Dolores acknowledged that forming a strong emotional connection with her parents was never a priority for her. Despite this, she recognized the difficulty of relinquishing the comforts and luxuries provided by their wealth, especially after they stopped supporting us financially. Following our marriage, just before the wedding, she mentioned she could handle it, shrugging off the concerns. She remarked that she already possessed a decade's worth of fashionable clothes, to which I concurred, stating that I didn't require anything additional. In response, she sighed and chuckled, adding that she intended to spend a lot of time unclothed. The beginning of our married life was joyful. Over the first 3 years, our careers progressed as expected. We upgraded from an apartment to a townhouse and built a good social circle. We stayed active, with me running and lifting weights while she frequented the gym. Surprisingly, our carnal life improved even more. Although our indulgent days reduced to once a month, from our college frequency of once a week, Dolores reconnected with Jane Britton, her debut party companion at 18, who encouraged her to join the local junior league, known for its charitable work. However, in our city, most members were affluent women or had incredibly wealthy spouses, with Dolores and a few others being exceptions. A significant portion were trophy wives much younger than their affluent husbands, surrounded by such opulence, especially during fundraisers at various mansions. Dolores developed a newfound appreciation for material possessions. She began overspending, exhausting almost all our earnings. When she started dipping into our modest savings, we had our first major argument. Although it was a heated disagreement, neither of us held on to any resentment. After one of our all-day indulgence sessions, during which she was particularly energetic and responsive, we quickly returned to normal. Later that week, she surprised me with an unexpected proposition. "Joe, I realize I can't spend our money recklessly, and I'm genuinely committed to slowing down. However, my 2 junior league friends truly value my company and are willing to cover expenses for our outings to New York, spa treatments, and other activities. I wanted to inform you about this so that you don't think I'm acting irresponsibly by joining them on these excursions." "What do they expect in return?" was my incredulous response. "They simply value my friendship." "Is it really that hard to grasp?" she said in a sweet tone, moving closer to me and planting quick, soft kisses on my neck, cheeks, and lips. "No, I also appreciate your openness. It means a lot. But what about their husbands? Won't they have concerns about their wives spending money on you?" "Jane and Amy's husbands are incredibly wealthy and are willing to indulge their wives in any way they desire. This is not a concern for them. What they spend on me is inconsequential in their eyes." After reflecting on it, I realized this was indeed true. Through my interactions with Jane and Amy at Junior League and other social events, I knew their husbands held them in high regard, with both spouses ranking among the top 200 richest Americans. "All right, no need to worry," I responded with a shrug. Following our conversation, money ceased to be a problem. However, something else changed. We began to socialize more with Jane and Amy, sometimes with their husbands and sometimes without. Jane and Amy began to flirt with me in earnest, which became increasingly revealing and uncomfortable, particularly with Amy. In some ways, Amy embodied the quintessential trophy wife. At 29, she surpassed any fashion model in beauty, exuding both regal elegance and approachable warmth. Married to Wilton Braxton, a septuagenarian ranked 35th among America's wealthiest individuals, Amy was the epitome of glamour. She was the only woman I'd ever seen who outshone Dolores in appearance, and she maintained her looks with unwavering dedication, including rigorous workouts with a personal trainer 5 days a week. Moreover, Amy was the most charitable person I'd encountered, tirelessly fundraising for causes like supporting battered women, alleviating child poverty, and aiding children with serious illnesses. When not engaged in exercise, socializing, shopping, or attending resort retreats, Amy dedicated herself tirelessly and energetically to charitable endeavors. If a fundraiser fell short on funds, Wilton Braxton readily made up the difference, seemingly finding joy in Amy's happiness. After a particularly flirtatious encounter with Amy at a mansion during a social event, during which she feigned intoxication, I knew it was time to discuss the situation with Dolores. The following day, after a pleasant brunch and an enjoyable morning of closeness, I sat Dolores down on our patio. "Darling, there's a sensitive matter I need to discuss with you." "What is it, dear?" she asked, smiling. "I'll be straightforward. Amy Braxton and Jane Britton seem to be making advances toward me whenever they get the chance. You've heard some of their comments yourself." "You must feel flattered," Dolores replied with a grin. "Well, maybe. Not entirely flattered," I continued, her grin turning mischievous. "Considering Amy's husband isn't satisfying her in the bedroom and Jane's husband isn't much better, I'm sure they're simply enjoying your company." "Do you discuss their bed lives with them?" I asked, puzzled. "Of course. Wealthy women always discuss their bed lives." "Do you discuss ours with them?" I hesitantly queried. "Yes, I've shared with them how you fulfill me in ways no other man can," she said, noticing my discomfort. "Do you divulge everything?" she teased. "Almost," she giggled, sensing my unease. "What about their reaction?" "They're eager for details." "They envy me," Dolores grinned. "I wish you wouldn't do this," I stammered. "Why not? They keep it between us." "Are you intoxicated when discussing our bed life?" "Sometimes, but often, especially during sober outings like spa trips or shopping, they live vicariously through me, and I'm happy to indulge them since they sponsor my activities," she answered without embarrassment. Seeing my distress and noticing my clenched hands, she approached, sat on my lap, and kissed me. "I wish you wouldn't do that again," I said between kisses. "On one hand, I don't want to offend them, but on the other, I'm only human. You know, they're very attractive." "Of course I understand, dear. In fact, Amy is probably the most stunning woman I've ever seen, and Jane isn't far behind. But I trust you can handle this." With that, she knelt down for the second time in as many weeks. I imagined it was Amy, and surprisingly, during mating, I imagined it was someone else for the first time since meeting Dolores. After that, Amy and Jane's flirtation only intensified. Some of Amy's comments, even in front of Dolores, were quite risque. Dolores simply smiled while I perspired. One Friday evening, the situation reached a critical point. Dolores and I were supposed to meet Amy and Wilton after work to attend the opening of a play downtown. But when I arrived, only Amy was there. She greeted me with an overly familiar hug. Shortly after, my phone rang. It was Dolores. "Honey, bad news. My brother Anthony's wife just called and said he was in an accident. It's not life-threatening, but she needs help with the children. I'm so upset I'll miss the performance. I can't refuse them." "Sorry to hear that, dear. How long will you be away?" I inquired, aware that Anthony and his family live just one suburb away. "I hope it's only a few hours, but I'll really miss it." "Me too, Dolores. I'll call you to let you know when I'll be back this evening. Listen, my love, if Amy or Wilton are there, will you give them the phone, okay?" "I love you," I responded, handing the phone to Amy. Amy and Dolores conversed for a while, with Amy expressing sentiments like, "We'll miss you, I understand," and "We'll take care of him." Shortly after, Amy returned my cell phone, and hers rang. After a brief conversation, during which she seemed disappointed, she passed the phone to me. "This is Wilton." "Joe," Wilton said. "Hello, Wilton, how are you?" I cautiously greeted. "Listen, Joe, a very important business deal just came up, and I have to take my private jet to Paris within the hour. I won't be back until Sunday evening. I'm really sorry I'll miss the show, but Amy really wants to go, so please join her and then go to dinner at my expense." I'd been through this scenario once before when Bernice set me up with Dolores. My suspicions were raised, but there was nothing I could do. Before we entered the theater, Amy noticed a couple of disappointed students at the box office who apparently had no idea that the opening night tickets would sell out, or how much they would cost even if they managed to stay. She paused, planting a kiss on my cheek before approaching the young man and woman. After chatting with them briefly, she handed them 2 tickets, and it seemed they were overwhelmed with gratitude. As the excited college kids followed us into the theater, I whispered to Amy, expressing how she had undoubtedly made their evening, if not their month or year. In response, she grinned and tightly squeezed my biceps, remarking that she could do the same for me. I blushed, acknowledging her words with a shy smile. The evening felt surreal, almost as if it belonged to another realm. Despite the excellent acting, Amy's continuous physical contact with me proved distracting. Even more so was the interaction with the 2 college students Amy had invited over during intermission. After introductions, the girl inquired if I was Amy's husband, to which Amy replied on my behalf, stating that I was her lover, winking at me mischievously. The young man's reaction to this caused him to spit out his drink, which Amy had poured for him, through his nose. Thankfully, we all shared a laugh, and I swiftly changed the subject. Throughout dinner, Amy persistently ran her foot up and down my leg and occasionally rested her hand on my thigh. It was evident she had consumed quite a few drinks, as her speech began to slur. I barely touched my food, attempting to keep the conversation light. After dinner, as I drove Amy home, she appeared to pass out. When we arrived, she was giggling and almost incoherent. I rang the doorbell of her mansion, but there was no answer. Eventually, I managed to wake Amy up. "Amy, no one is answering the door at your house. The maid has the day off today," she slurred, with glassy eyes. "Got a key?" I queried. "Right here," she giggled, passing me her clutch. In her small clutch, I quickly located the key, assisted her out of the car, and physically carried her to the front door. A task not without its challenges, ascending the 10 steps from the circular driveway to the ornate entryway. I propped her against the front wall, unlocked the door, and ushered her inside. Leading the way, I supported her as she stumbled behind me. Suddenly, she straightened up, closed the door, and leaned against it. Extracting her mobile phone, she pressed a button, her expression unexpectedly content. "What's up?" I inquired. "Your wife's about to call," Amy said with a mischievous grin. At that instant, my phone rang and I turned away from Amy to answer the call. "Hi, honey," Dolores greeted. "Anthony's wife asked me to stay until Sunday evening because they really needed me. I hope you don't mind. I wish I could chat longer, but there's so much commotion here. Love you and can't wait for Sunday." Then she abruptly ended the call without acknowledging my request to wait or my questions. "What's the deal?" I turned back to Amy to find her standing undressed. Except for her high heels and a necklace of rubies and diamonds. Her allure and sensuality left me breathless. "What?" That was the only foolish thing I managed to say, apart from a sigh. Amy approached me, pressing her magnificent chest against mine and wrapping her arms around my neck. "I'm sorry you're in the dark, Joe, but Dolores orchestrated it all. She set everything up." Confused but beginning to understand, I muttered. "And Wilton?" "Wilton's known since we got married that he can't fulfill me in bed, but as long as the guy is married, approved by him, and we're discreet, he doesn't mind my extracurricular activities. He gave the green light for you, as his call to you showed." "I see." My eyes widened, and I was rendered speechless as I gazed into Amy's mesmerizing azure eyes. "You're not going to be the first guy in my life to turn me down, are you, Joe?" she asked rhetorically before slipping her tongue into my mouth. While we kissed fervently, a flurry of thoughts raced through my mind in no particular order. It was all arranged by Dolores, likely to cover the costs of those lavish shopping trips and spa treatments. I'm just a man. How can I refuse the most beautiful woman I have ever seen in my life, who is also cheerful and philanthropic? I must be in Bizarro World. This doesn't happen on Earth, in real life. When our kiss broke, Amy whispered, "Let's go upstairs. I have other plans." I chuckled in response. With that, I spun her around, accidentally knocking off one of her Christian Louboutin heels. I carried her into the living room, later sprawled out on the luxurious sofa, and then proceeded with the full treatment. While Amy lay deliriously on the sofa, I scooped her up and ascended the stairs until I found a room that I was confident was one of many guest rooms. I laid her on the bed, locked the door, and quickly undressed. After a quick dinner that Amy prepared herself, as there was no household staff in sight, we parted ways on Sunday evening around 6:30. My goal had been achieved. She could hardly walk straight. I had never felt better in my life, not even after the most satisfying encounters with Dolores. This troubled me deeply. "We'll keep in touch," were Amy's parting words, chuckling. I exited her front door and drove home, my mind in turmoil the entire way. Contemplating the purpose behind recent events and concerns about potential repercussions on my relationship with Dolores. I parked on the street due to her car blocking the garage entrance. Quietly entering our townhouse through the side door, I inadvertently overheard Dolores engaged in a jovial conversation on the phone. Opting to remain silent, I listened in as she giggled happily. It became apparent that she was speaking with someone who had previously doubted her, but now acknowledged her success in orchestrating something. After a few minutes, I discreetly exited through the side door and then re-entered noisily through the front. Reuniting with Dolores proved unexpectedly smooth and pleasant. She embraced me warmly, showering my neck, cheeks, and lips with rapid kisses, her face illuminated by a constant smile. During our interaction, I learned that Anthony's situation wasn't serious, that she was pleased I enjoyed the play, and that she hoped Amy had a good time. She didn't inquire about my whereabouts, and I refrained from offering explanations. On Tuesday, Amy called me at work to express her appreciation. She sounded cheerful and suggested meeting next week to discuss arranging another encounter. In response, I grinned. We shared a laugh before hanging up. Despite my euphoric rendezvous with Amy, clearly endorsed by Dolores and Wilton, I remained apprehensive about what the future held. Over the next 2 weeks, I attempted to broach the topic with Dolores. Her response was always to please me or steer the conversation toward other forms of closeness. Our bed life remained intense as ever, but my inner turmoil persisted. Even after 2 more encounters with Amy over the following month, though not as extensive as that hedonistic weekend, my disquiet lingered. However, in public, Amy ceased her overt flirtation, always maintaining a pleasant demeanor. Jane began to pester me, even in Dolores's presence, and I could foresee where it was heading. I remained caught in a state of internal conflict, despite Dolores's efforts to avoid any discussion or confrontation on the matter. I harbored doubts about whether Dolores truly loved me, despite her unprecedented affection, kindness, and attentiveness. I questioned whether everything was as genuine as it appeared, along with various other uncertainties, which began to impact my work. Then, by chance, I found myself in the yard, unaware of Dolores's presence, while in the basement attending to some tasks. The landline rang, displaying Amy's name on the caller ID. Curiosity overcame any qualms about intruding on Dolores and Amy's privacy. I waited until I heard Dolores answer upstairs before picking up the phone in the basement, simultaneously muting the microphone. While I can't recall the exact conversation, what resonated clearly was Dolores's genuine love for me and her pride in having something that other members of the social circle lacked: a husband who consistently satisfied her physically. She took pride in this aspect, seemingly unbothered by the idea of sharing me with her closest friends, knowing they lacked the same satisfaction due to their spouses. Dolores didn't express concerns about me leaving her for another woman, confident in our mutual love. Following that phone call, my torment essentially ceased, and I bore my burden steadfastly. 3 years have elapsed since that conversation, marking the end of my inner turmoil. While I complied with Dolores's wishes, I remained firm in my stance against her having a love-making relationship with another man. Although I never explicitly discussed this with Dolores, I made it clear to Amy and Jane that I wouldn't condone Dolores taking a lover. I'm certain they conveyed this to Dolores. As their conversations revealed, they shared everything. I began to see it as a duty akin to servitude, as did Jane. Though not as physically attractive as Dolores or Amy, Jane possessed a strong libido, focusing primarily on love-making gratification, with less emphasis on closeness or playfulness. Our bi-weekly encounters with Jane were relatively brief and straightforward. Conversely, the nearly weekly sessions with Amy proved more complex. Despite my efforts to suppress them, I developed genuine feelings for Amy, although I couldn't discern whether her affection for me matched mine for her. Nonetheless, her vibrant and playful demeanor lifted my spirits like no other. With Wilton's declining health, I pondered the implications of his potential passing. I lacked answers, and the situation grew more intricate as Dolores was now 8 months pregnant.
Story 2.
Divorcing my cheating wife. Her life spirals downward as I rebuild myself and focus on our kids. Hi everyone, TLDR, 13 years together, 9 years married, 2 kids aged 6 and 3. Wife cheated twice with a coworker, confessed. I had no clue something was going on. I did the pick-me dance for 2 months and caught evidence of her going back for a third time one day after Father's Day. I confronted her, terminated the relationship, and lawyered up. Now we are talking agreement. My situation: I'm a freelance technician for audiovisual, TV, corporate concerts, comedy shows, fashion. My schedule is very messy. We've been separated for 1 month, and I had a hard time staying in no contact. Tonight, I broke no contact because I came back from my parents who live 300 kilometers away. I took some time with my kids. We still share the same apartment, though when she's here I go away, and she does too, except when I really can't. So, when I was unpacking my kids' things, I couldn't refrain from asking, how are things going with the affair partner? Not very smart, is it? Well, she didn't look good. She has lost a lot of weight, so did I. News on the front: the company she's working for is going bankrupt, so she's found another job somewhere else, but with €3,000 less a year in pay. She apparently is not with the affair partner anymore because he betrayed her and told a lot of people. Now, she can't work in her field because she's labeled with a bad reputation, and it's a small world. Her friends won't talk to her now, at least for a bit of time, because she hasn't been a good friend lately. She smokes 2 packs a day. Her brother won't talk to her for some time because she borrowed money for the holidays. I'm not paying anymore, except she said it was for the holidays, but she lied to him. She needed money to give me back the €2,000 she stole from a savings account I had asked her to invest in some of my parents' money. She's made a Tinder account, which is none of my business, and says now she can really be a slut. Every detail has been narrated while crying. I feel stuck in a maze. For custody, I want to make it 50-50ths, but my job is quite difficult to make that work. She wants to have full custody of the kids, with me having free visiting rights whenever I want, because according to her, she has ruined her life and wants to take care of the kids because they're all she has left. I feel like she's lost her mind. I feel that I'm going to either have to work all the time to pay for child support, or pay for someone to come home when I can't. My parents and brother are far away, and I can't ask them to come every 2 weeks, even for a day or two. I really want to raise my children. The situation is really stressful right now. I'm under anxiolytics to help me sleep and shut down my brain. I run 3 times a week, eat as healthy as I can, and have lost 14 kilograms in 3 months. I vent with friends and family. I know she's throwing self-pity at me, and she doesn't even want the relationship back, and I wouldn't either. But this is hard. I'm scared for the kids. I know she's a good mom because she has been so far, even though we have different views on education. I feel stuck in a loop. The amount of stress is overwhelming. Thanks for any advice. Ask for advice and you're going to get some. First up, you're still thinking of her as your wife and partner, which is why you're having a hard time making the right decision. You should not give a hoot about her emotional, manipulative nonsense. Consult with your lawyer and reach out to friends and family so that you can get a more objective perspective on what would be the proper course of action for you and your kids. Her issues are for her to deal with at this point, not your circus, not your monkeys. I know it's hard because one can't just turn off their feelings for a person who once had an important role in their life. But the marriage is over, and she did a lot of damage to cause that ending. As such, now you must establish proper boundaries and prioritize your interests and what's best for your kids. She sounds like she's not remotely stable enough to even be considered for 50-50ths custody, much less full custody. She's clearly out of her mind. A good mom doesn't smoke 2 packs a day around her children. She's spiraling. Tell her she can be better than this. Have her start walking a lot, see a doctor for a checkup, and save herself from self-destruction. It's in your best interest to help her for the sake of your kids. Isn't it better to divorce her when she has a job? Maybe tell the attorney to pause the process for now. Tell her, get your life and health on track and I'll divorce you as soon as possible. Nothing says coping like 2 packs a day. The level of commitment to self-destruction here is truly commendable. 2 packs a day, that's dedication. And isn't it delightful how she's managed to alienate not only her husband, but also her friends with her impressive display of poor decision-making skills? And the no-contact rule? A move as timeless as it is ineffective. It's like trying to resist the allure of a freshly baked pie cooling on the windowsill. You know you shouldn't, but temptation gets the best of you. But as the comments say, let go of the illusion of partnership, OP, and embrace the clarity of independence. After all, why waste precious brain cells deciphering her manipulative nonsense when you could be planning your glorious escape from the circus of her making? Update: today she's gone with our kids for her week of holidays. D-Day 1 was April 24th when she confessed to the affair. I did the pick me dance and tried to fix things. D-Day 2 was June 21st when she cheated again, and I discovered it. I asked for a divorce, married for 9 years, 2 kids aged 6 and 3, and an apartment we can't sell for another year and a half. 1 month separated. We alternate staying in the apartment and can't do much before the divorce is official. Today hurts like hell. I'm 37, male, left alone in our apartment, and she's 35, female, gone on her week of holidays. We were supposed to go together this time of year. Summer holidays, riding bikes, going to the beach, playing with the kids. I feel devastated, and it feels so unreal. I went to my individual counselor, did some paperwork, and went for a walk. Tonight, I'll be eating with a friend at a restaurant, and I tried to fill my weekend agenda, but I have too much time alone. Everyone is on vacation. On Monday, I'm going to my parents in Normandy. I feel like I'm regressing into a child who wants to cry to his mom, but I'm looking forward to it. It hurts, it really does. I've got so much cognitive dissonance right now that I've even considered, what if she wants me back? We texted yesterday, I know I shouldn't. She's not with the affair partner anymore. He played her. She's terrified of going alone for a week with our kids in a mobile home in the south of France. But I guess these are the consequences. I have the second week with my kids, and thank God my parents and niece will be with me. I can't wrap my head around what's going on. I mean, I fully understand what's at play here, but I'm doing what's recommended. Chump Lady's book, her blog, individual counseling, exercise, healthy eating, surrounding myself with love from friends and family, and talking openly about it. I cry, though I haven't journaled yet, but I will. I feel like I've told the story a million times, and yet it's still not understandable. I try to call my friends and family whenever I feel despair. Sometimes I don't even know what to say, I just don't want to be alone. I had everything. We had everything. I went through my hate and anger phase at the beginning, but now it's just sadness, despair, a void. The good news is, I still managed to get up, wash, shave, take care of my kids, put on some perfume, dress nicely, and work. But I have no dreams, no purpose apart from my kids. I'm a sound engineer in audiovisual, passionate about music, a drummer. I play guitar, bass, and I love cinema, series, concerts, and people. I have no connection to any of these things at the moment. I have zero libido, which is cruel because I'm the kind who likes to eat, sleep, enjoy good times, and have sex. What's left to epicure right now? I can still joke a bit. I don't know why I'm writing this. I'm tired and lost. I will get through this, but wow, I've never been hurt like this in my entire life. Your ex-wife's off gallivanting on holiday while you're left to wrestle with the ghosts of marital bliss past in your oh-so-empty apartment. The joys of separation. But hey, at least you're ticking all the boxes of post-breakup self-care, therapy, exercise, healthy eating, and crying on cue. And let's not forget the obligatory spiral into what-if territory, because nothing says progress like revisiting the same mental hamster wheel over and over again, right? Just keep on trucking, keep on grooving, and remember, the only way out is through. Update. Hi everyone, I've been posting 2 to 3 times here, and I appreciate all the advice I've been given. Tonight, I feel like writing to the community to share. It's also therapeutic. French person here, 37, male, betrayed by a 35, female. 2 kids, 3 and 6 years old. Divorce is ongoing. You can read my previous posts for more details. I'm returning from holidays with my kids tomorrow, and I'm dreading coming home and having to see her face after 2 weeks, as we share the same apartment for now. I should use the following for stand-up comedy. This week, I had an absurd phone call with her about her cat. She left for the first week of holidays with our kids. I didn't want to be alone and went to my parents in Normandy. Our neighbor fed the cat while we were away. I managed with the neighbor when I left, but she didn't when she came back. I don't know her holiday schedule, so she got woken up by the neighbor at 10 a.m. entering the apartment. This makes me smile, and somehow it's my fault. So, she took advantage of this to blame shift again about the end of our marriage. The charm-pity-rage cycle is spot on. She's convinced herself that I'm spying on her phone, rolling my eyes. A friend of mine who checks on me regularly told me she's your best therapist, and he's not wrong. I've made progress because I could hear all the blame shifting, and it didn't guilt me. I was able to just reply, I know my wrongs in the relationship. I'm not sure you know yours, and anyway, it doesn't justify what you've put me through. When she insisted, I just hung up on her. But it made me think of all the things I did for her and for us as a family. When we started dating, I was in a do-it-yourself punk band, touring Europe and mostly the UK. I had no money. Her parents are divorced but wealthy on both sides. She's Jewish, I'm not. I was raised Catholic turned agnostic. I was never accepted by her parents because, in their eyes, middle-class punk rocker isn't a career, and I'm not Jewish. But for 13 years I sat at every Seder, every Pa, every Hanukkah. I gave my children her name, and I also took her name for various reasons. I agreed to circumcise my son. I took crap behind my back, and she never had my back in front of them, or when I wasn't there. But still, I showed up for her at first, and for the kids after. Oh, and when the kids came into our lives, her parents didn't like me standing my ground about education. On her mother's side, I felt judged all the time. Her stepfather is a nightmare. He judged me and maybe pushed me into depression while I was reconverting into a sound engineer because I wasn't following the career path he had in mind for me. I spent 2 months working in the apartment we bought together with my father, taking down walls, redesigning the place, and decorating it. She hasn't even hung one picture frame on any wall. I always had intentions for her. Often I'd buy her small things, nothing big. Maybe a cookie on the way home, or a book I thought she'd love. On Fridays when I wasn't working, I'd go to the next city's Jewish bakery to buy challah and traditional Jewish meals so we could do Shabbat as a family. I never wanted to convert, I'm just very interested in and curious about traditions and religions. When I did all those things, it felt normal, like I did them without expecting anything in return. I know what you might think codependency. I don't know. Is that what it was? I didn't feel codependent, as I kept playing in bands far less since having kids and had a life of my own. Too many red flags. I wanted to feel accepted by her family, that's for sure. It felt like I was these last 2 to 3 years, but deep down I know I never would have been. I just loved her for 13 years, even through the ups and downs. So tonight, I didn't want to vent but to write down my story. For myself, for anyone who cares, and not to point out what I did wrong, but more everything I did right. I try to focus on this. My mother told me while I was crying, she doesn't deserve you. Hell no, she doesn't deserve me. Thanks for reading. The classic tale of ignoring red flags like they're mere suggestions instead of glaring warnings. It's like driving straight into a tornado while whistling a happy tune, pretending the storm clouds aren't looming overhead. But who has time to notice warning signs when you're busy playing the role of supportive partner, right? From awkward family dinners to judgmental in-laws, you've weathered more storms than a seasoned sailor on the high seas. And let's not forget the delightful stepfather who moonlights as a professional joy killer, because nothing says welcome to the family like a healthy dose of judgment and passive-aggressive commentary. You may have been blinded by love for 13 long years, but even the most resilient rose-colored glasses can't hide the truth forever. Here's to acknowledging your own worth and realizing that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. Update, as the title says, I found a place to live. It has enough space for me and my kids. It's not near the schools, but it's manageable. I'm looking forward to it, but I'm also torn. I have a few days ahead of me to pack things and get the F out of here. Moving next Sunday. It's heart-wrenching to pack. I cried uncontrollably 3 times today. No contact was dang hard, as we've been living in the same apartment, taking turns, but we met. There was one day where she was sad, called me, said she's sorry, etc. She wasn't with the affair partner anymore, so I got to experience the false remorse again. Then, 3 days after, she asked if she could hold me in her arms. She said if I wanted to F her for my own pleasure, I could. Can't even take care of myself, so that helped. What the F? It was so hard to walk out after hearing all this, but I did, of course. I'm proud of myself for reaching out to friends and family, keeping my head fairly straight, with ups and downs, of course. Staying away from alcohol and other things, and taking care of my kids. Even though that part is hard, I know how to take care of them. I always have. I had some time alone with them prior to this, but it's hard to do it knowing that this is my new reality and it will be forever like this. While heartbroken, I'm keeping my exercise and healthy eating routine. I've lost 17 kilograms now. I need to reinforce those butt cheeks because I've lost weight fast. Listening to podcasts helped, and I managed to watch Ted Lasso without her 2 days ago, and I spent 3 hours not thinking too much about all of this. But I'm struggling with no contact. I know, it's poison. Why the F do I keep talking to her sometimes? I had to call my cousin one night after her sadness. I was quite back in the bargaining stage, and I knew it, and it didn't help. I asked him, "Dude, she's coming tonight. I need you to slap my face, bring me back to reality, and keep me from talking to her." She's such a devil in disguise. Elvis Presley's voice, my mind still cannot process this. I'm just not there yet. Anyway, I'm moving. This will help. I'm overwhelmed by how much crap I have to do because I know she won't. Changing contracts for electricity, internet. I have to deal with both my new apartment and the old one, while packing and taking care of the kids in the mornings and evenings next week. Let's take a moment to appreciate the absurdity of trying to maintain no contact while sharing an apartment. It's like trying to avoid stepping on Lego pieces in a room filled with nothing but Lego pieces. Talk about a Herculean task. And then there's the tempting offers of physical reconciliation. Moving out of the lion's den and into your own den of solitude sounds like a recipe for adventure, doesn't it? Update. Hi everyone. Out of the blue, I just want to share my progress. I'm sorry I can't do short posts, as writing here is therapeutic. You can read my post history, but in the end, it's just a typical chump story. I'm not minimizing it, it's just that I feel better about it now. This sub has been such a great help. I'm very thankful for this community. I'm thankful for the people who take the time to give advice, the people who reach out to share their stories, so we don't feel alone in this. From the first time I posted here, I deleted my post because I wasn't ready to hear the truth. After D-Day 2, that changed. I'm roughly 6 months post D-Day 1, 4 months post D-Day 2, and my morale has improved so much day and night. I moved out of the apartment we bought. She stayed. It was part of an agreement that suited me. I was very bitter about moving out, having been chumped and all, but it was the best thing that could happen to me. After my second visit of apartments near France, I'm freelance, I was desperate. Crappy places, too small or so expensive, no room for my kids. Then I took a shot at another one, not very convinced, and I found exactly the right spot. It's a place to retreat, a place to heal. It's quiet, not so expensive, and I have a decent room for my kids, and they are happy. I'm starting to enjoy being the captain of my own ship. I cook whatever I want. I take time to cook proper meals most of the time. Just cook myself a nice green curry chicken and vegetables. My relationship with my kids has improved. I get to be the good cop for once. When I'm working, I don't feel guilty for not being home, and I take time to grab a beer with my colleagues. I keep doing my exercise routine and feeling good about my body for the first time in 20 years. We co-parent. Okay? I impose and respect my boundaries with her now. She called last week at 10:30 p.m. to talk about the kids. I politely told her never to call me at this hour unless it's an emergency. I'm home, not thinking about her. I've had ups and downs, but I feel the downs are less frequent. I don't think too much about the affair anymore. It pops up sometimes, but it's very, very manageable. I've used every means of getting better, took every advice. Therapy, friends, family, exercise, journaling, getting the feelings out, getting up in the mornings, going to work, focusing. I've read the books, listened to the podcasts, and talked about it openly to anyone in my first, second, and sometimes third circle who's interested in knowing the details of what happened. They've all been very helpful. I'm still doing a lot of it, but now I can also spend time not talking about it. I'm starting to enjoy life again. Next step is getting back to playing music in a band. I'm off Xanax since 4 weeks ago, and I sleep very well. I'm not there yet, of course, but man, do I feel relieved. Relieved that the light at the end of the tunnel people talk about in this sub is getting brighter and brighter. Relieved that the pain has deflated. I cracked open my head last week and ended up in the hospital, nothing really serious. I just walked into a tow truck parked on the side of the road. I wasn't looking up. The pain was brutal. It bled a lot, and the people took care of me. They stitched me up. I got home and cried a lot that day, never felt so alone. The wound was fresh. Day after day, it got better, and today, it just itches. I know there will be a day when what happened these last few months will be a scar. Today, it still itches very much, but when that day comes, I'll look at it and be thankful to the people who got me through this. I'm proud of myself, stronger for it. I drove myself to the hospital and the nurse took care of me. This is what people do here, and what friends and family are. 4. Reach out. Thanks for reading. Final update. Hi everyone. I haven't posted in a while and I wanted to share an update on my situation and bring some positivity. In my last post, I mentioned how much better I felt. Things have improved more and more over time. Looking back at those dark times, it's crazy how well I feel now. I ran the half marathon in Paris and finished 7 minutes earlier than expected. A lot of emotion that day, thank you, cheater. Got my social life back, thank you, cheater. Starting new music projects, thank you, cheater. I don't have to deal with my in-laws and put on a happy face, thank you, cheater. Met a cool woman, independent, sane, mature, still in the early stages, but it feels great. Only green flags so far, no drama, thank you, cheater. Therapy has been tremendously helpful. We don't really talk about the D-Day anymore. Now we're focusing on me, and it feels good to realize that the affair didn't define me. I haven't developed trust issues, thanks to therapy and the people around me. Still no contact with the ex. Last time I saw her was at my kid's first therapy session. I can see she's putting on an I'm okay mask. She cries every time I bring up an issue regarding the divorce, though. She can't manage money. She actually has to work now at her new job, and the boss isn't her father-in-law, so the work schedule is heavier. She doesn't get to see much of the kids because of the hours at the office. I'm sure she still sees the affair partner or other people, but I know her. She rug sweeps a lot. I'm not really interested in karma anymore because I'm so happy with my life now that I don't give a crap. But I know it'll backlash at some point. I just hope the kids won't be too affected when it happens. In 1 month I'll be officially divorced and I'm looking forward to it. I finally feel like I'm out of the tunnel. No more crying over my old life or her. I don't miss her, I just feel sorry for my kids because it's been hard on them. Anyway, thanks for reading, and for everyone in the early stages of grief, shock, and the crap storm, put in the work. Take your time to grieve, feel everything, and it will be okay. From running marathons to dodging emotional landmines, you've truly mastered the art of turning tragedy into triumph. Who knew a cheating ex could be the catalyst for a whole new lease on life? Talk about silver linings in the cloud of marital betrayal. Here's to scars that itch and wounds that heal, both literal and metaphorical. Because in the end, it's not about the pain we endure, but the strength we gain from overcoming it. Keep on running, keep on thriving, and remember, when life throws tow trucks your way, just duck and weave like a champ. Cheers to that! OP, what do you think? Have you ever been in the same boat? Share your experiences in the comments below, and thank you for joining us today.
Story 3.
I feel completely lost because I just found out that my 42-year-old wife, with whom I've been married for 12 years, has been having an affair. The police called me in for questioning about the assault on her lover, and right now, I don't know what to do. My mind is not clear, and I'm seeking some direction. We have an amazing 11-year-old son, and until last night, I believed we had a good marriage. I thought I treated her well, and we didn't face any financial or confidentiality issues. I used to wake up every morning thankful that she's my wife, but now I'm unsure about everything. Yesterday, I received a call from my local police department as I was finishing work, asking me to come to the police station as soon as possible. This made me panic, and I asked if something had happened to my wife or son. They assured me not to worry and just come to the station quickly. Upon arrival, they placed me in a room with a table and chairs, asked for my name, and then started questioning me about a guy my wife works with. I haven't seen or talked to this guy since December 2019. At my wife's company Christmas party, the officers repeatedly asked me how long I've known and how I found out. After an hour of this, I stopped answering their questions and kept asking about the safety of my son and wife. We went back and forth for about 2 hours, with breaks in between when they left the room for 15 to 20 minutes, only to return and restart the questioning, resembling some low-budget cop show. The last time they entered, the cop handed me a tablet and showed me a video of my wife and the guy from her work being closeness. After that, I don't recall much, except for repeatedly screaming in shock and having a full-blown panic attack in the middle of the police station. A paramedic checked my high blood pressure, and despite the recommendation to go to the hospital, I refused, insisting I needed to find my wife and son. Once I calmed down, the officers explained that the guy in the video had an affair with my wife and apparently several other women. That morning, he was found in critical condition in his driveway, having been thumped, ruined, and set on fire. They didn't know if he would survive. His wife gave permission to check his phone and computer, where they found the video of my wife. They asked where I was that morning, and I told them the gym, then work about 10 minutes from the gym. At that point, they said I could leave, but suggested I might not want to stay at my house because they weren't sure if his affair with my wife could be the reason for the attack. They also mentioned my wife wasn't the only person he had an affair with, prompting me to rush home. My son was staying with our neighbors, so I picked him up and we packed some clothes and his school laptop. I grabbed my weapon and we headed to my parents' house, 45 minutes away. I still haven't heard from my wife. Her phone is going straight to voicemail. I called the officer who gave me his card, and he informed me that she is at the hospital with the guy she's been cheating with. I'm here in bed with my son on one side and my 38 on the other. My dad is sleeping in his chair in the living room with an auto shotty across his lap, and I haven't slept in over 30 hours. I don't even know where to start. Any help would be appreciated right now. Update. I learned from my lawyer that the police have significant authority, especially if you're not under arrest. They can pretty much do or say anything, even lie directly to your face, which is what happened. Turns out, when I contacted the detective, my wife wasn't at the hospital with her lover. She had been admitted to the psychiatric facility earlier that day while he was still in surgery. I don't know why they lied about it, but it's made me highly suspicious of law enforcement. After waking up that afternoon, I reached out to my uncle's law partner, who's also a family friend. He came to my parents' house, discussed my options with me, and his entire law firm is now handling both my divorce and criminal defense. On that Sunday, he obtained an emergency custody order and a protective order against my wife for me, my son, and my parents. Our court date is in 60 days. The police served her on Monday as she was leaving the psychiatric hospital. According to her brother, who's a close friend of mine, she didn't take it well and is staying with her parents for the time being. I still haven't talked to her, and she hasn't made any attempt to speak to me either. Whether it's due to shame, indifference, or the order of protection, I don't know, but I'm glad nonetheless. My wife isn't the person I thought she was, and I feel ashamed for not realizing it sooner. I had to tell my son the truth, age-appropriate and straightforward. His first words were a plea not to let mommy take him away. When I asked why, he told me my wife had been treating him poorly when I wasn't around, threatening to take him away if he told me, saying he'd never see me again. She's been emotionally torturing our son, and I was too blind to see it. That hurt me more than the video, to be honest. I informed the lawyer about my son's revelation, and he used it, along with her mental state and commitment, to secure emergency custody. I've contacted his school for therapy resources, and he will start therapy after the first of the year. I feel like the worst father at this point. Regarding our families, her parents contacted me on Tuesday, wanting to see us. I was still at my parents' house and allowed them to come, but she wasn't allowed near us. They agreed. They were apologetic, and her mother cried the entire time. Her father was heartbroken and referred to my wife as that girl. They both felt something was wrong with her and didn't raise her to be this way. We hugged and cried before they left, and I assured them they'll always be part of our lives, regardless of the divorce. After what my son told me, their visit was the hardest part of our whole ordeal. My lawyers have been doing excellent work. They found out that the man my wife was sleeping with has a lengthy criminal record. One lawyer told me that when they printed out the guy's arrest record, the printer ran for 5 minutes straight. From what they learned, he's currently on parole for medication offenses and has had gang affiliations in the past. He's still alive but in critical condition and may not make it. The firm has an investigator who contacted the co-worker who drove my wife to the hospital. The co-worker revealed that my wife's affair was an open secret around the office. My lawyers think that's how the police figured out who I and my wife were. In the video, there are several photos from last year's Christmas party at her work, and my wife and I are in several of them. That's where I am currently in this whole situation. I'm just numb, still lost, and heartbroken. How long does the numbness last? And is there any way to get past this emotional lethargy faster? I mean, really numb, like a dream. Everything I've just said has felt like it's happening to someone else, no doubt. Update. I apologize for the long message, but I needed to express my feelings this week. First, my son is improving significantly. He began therapy in early January, and the change is already noticeable. I asked if it was okay to talk to his therapist, and he agreed. So, I've had a few discussions with her. The therapist mentioned that my soon-to-be ex verbally and emotionally mistreated our son when they were alone. He couldn't make noise or bother her, and she'd leave him alone for long periods, even overnight when I was away. She threatened him not to speak up, saying he'd be taken away and never see me again. The therapist noted that this has left him feeling powerless and dependent at a critical stage in his development, when he should be feeling empowered and self-reliant. To address this, I bought him his own phone and helped him memorize family members' numbers and relevant addresses. I've been teaching him situational awareness, paying attention to street names, and reading addresses and buildings. We've also role-played how to ask for help and explain to strangers when he feels unsafe. Despite it being a short time, I can see that it's really boosting his confidence. Any suggestions on how to continue building his self-reliance would be appreciated. His safety and well-being are still my top priorities. Regarding myself, I'm doing as well as expected. I started therapy around the same time as my son, and though I don't talk to my therapist as much as he does, it has helped to discuss my thoughts and feelings about everything that has happened to us and our family. The numbness is gone, replaced by a white-hot ball of anger in the pit of my stomach whenever I think of my soon-to-be ex and what she's put her family through. Strangely, although I dislike feeling angry, it's easier to deal with than the numbness. My therapist says this is part of the grieving process, and it's not just how we feel, but how we channel those emotions that matters. My legal situation is honestly the scariest thing I've dealt with in my life. I was granted temporary full custody and child support, which I didn't want, but my lawyer insisted we ask for it, along with a continuation of the order of protection for myself and my son. During the order hearing, which neither my wife nor her lawyer attended, the judge asked if we would allow supervised visits, but my son refused, prompting my lawyer to advise bringing him along. The judge asked my son if he would speak to him alone, and he agreed. After their meeting, the judge granted the temporary orders and ordered therapy and a psychological evaluation for my son. Fortunately, the therapist he is seeing is somehow involved with or accredited to work with the courts, so he doesn't have to see another therapist. My lawyer says this is good because it means his therapist can provide a custody recommendation, but it still scares me that she could get some form of custody after what she put him through. As for the affair partner, I don't know much. According to my lawyers, he's still alive but still in the hospital. I haven't heard from the police since my initial interview, so there's nothing new to report there. As for my soon-to-be ex, I still haven't seen her since D-Day. I was questioned until Thursday. She has attempted to call me a few times, but I haven't answered. And when she called from another number, I hung up immediately. I have nothing to say to her, and I don't want to hear anything she has to say to me. Her lawyer requested a preliminary hearing for our court-appointed mediation. She was served the second week of January. She was there with her lawyer, and I know this might sound trivial, but even with the mask, she looked bald. My soon-to-be ex was always an attractive and athletic woman. I swear, in our wedding photos, she looks like a supermodel. But now, seeing her significant weight loss is disturbing. She appears sickly and weak. During most of the training, she avoided looking at me, keeping her face down. In short, their requests were absurd. They sought validation during the divorce and shared custody, even asking us to drop the operations. Surprisingly, she wants to live together until the divorce is finalized. And no, I'm not joking. After everything, she insists on staying in the same house. It was so insulting that I had a throbbing headache throughout the entire meeting. But it was all worthwhile for the major revelation we shared with her lawyer. When her lawyer inquired about handling asset division, my lawyer, with a shocked expression, responded, "What division of assets? Read the prenup." The look on her lawyer's face was priceless because she hadn't informed him about the prenup. My late uncle, who founded the law firm I use, crafted the prenup and even hired a lawyer for her before our marriage. According to my lawyer, it's exceptionally well structured as we never mixed finances. The house we live in was a gift from my uncle, with all utilities and insurance in my name. Vehicles are registered in the owner's name only, and we never signed for each other's debts. We have a shared savings account for household needs and emergencies. But she has already drained it, leaving less than $300 from an initial $8,000. The prenup stipulates a 50-50 division of marital assets and debt, with ownership reverting to the individual who accrued intangible assets and personal debt. The infidelity clause states that admitting or being caught in infidelity forfeits the right to claim any form of spousal support. There's more to it, and my lawyer assures me that breaking this prenup is nearly impossible because it's the fairest he's ever read. However, her lawyer's last request bothered me. He suggested postponing official mediation for 6 months while she attends rehab for substance mistreat, a concern raised by some. I hadn't considered it, but my lawyer and I will discuss and decide. After talking to my lawyer, my soon-to-be ex literally spoke for the first time, asking me to read a letter she wrote. Despite my lawyer's warning, I decided to read it when I got home. It started with the expected cheater's apologies, expressions of love, regret for mistreating our son, and a desire for us again. She explained that after a major surgery 2 years ago, she began abusing medication, buying from people at work, including her affair partner, who eventually became her go-to source. When she ran out of money, she resorted to sleeping with him to get more. She said she hid this from me out of fear I'd make her stop, claiming he meant nothing to her but a way to satisfy her weakness. She now acknowledges the gravity of her actions, wants to change for our family, and asks for time to prove her commitment. I want to clarify that I'll never reconcile with my wife. Our marriage ended when she cheated and mistreated our son. However, I feel like the most naive person for not noticing sooner. I'm torn between discarding her or feeling justified in my sense of betrayal. Right now, I'm overwhelmed with anger and resentment towards her. But am I handling someone battling their demons appropriately? I feel lost and hopeless. Any advice would be greatly appreciated.
Story 4. For as long as I can remember, my life has revolved around meticulous planning and hard work. My parents instilled in me the value of perseverance, which shaped my journey into engineering, a field where precision and adaptability are key. I spent my college years buried in textbooks and internships, determined to carve a path in the competitive industry. That determination paid off when I landed a role at a top design build firm shortly after graduation. Over the years, I've embraced the challenges of my career with enthusiasm. From late nights drafting project plans to early mornings on construction sites, I poured my energy into every detail. My responsibilities expanded when I became chief engineer, a role that demanded not only technical expertise, but also leadership and quick decision-making. Yet with every achievement, there was a price to pay: long hours, constant travel, and the strain it placed on my personal life. Despite the demanding schedule, I believed I'd found balance in my marriage. Reagan was my anchor, someone who understood the pressures of my job and supported me through thick and thin, or so I thought. She often joked about how unpredictable my travel schedule was, but her lighthearted remarks reassured me that she didn't mind. I assumed our bond was strong enough to weather the storms, and I worked hard to ensure she never felt neglected. Still, there were moments of doubt, times when I questioned if I was devoting enough time to my personal life. My frequent absence weighed on me, and I tried to compensate by making the most of my time at home. It was during one of those short-lived breaks, after returning from yet another business trip, that I first felt the faint tremors of unease, a subtle shift in the dynamics of my relationship with Reagan. Several years ago, while leading engineering projects for a construction firm, I often found myself on the road whenever challenges demanded immediate attention. One particular week followed this familiar pattern. With a 7:21 a.m. departure from Hartsfield-Jackson, I was up before dawn ensuring everything was in order before heading to Baton Rouge. By Tuesday afternoon, I was immersed in problem-solving on-site, collaborating with the team to address complications that had cropped up. Although I trusted Etherly, our project manager, to handle things moving forward, I decided to keep a closer watch to ensure no further issues arose. Wednesday afternoon, I drove to New Orleans to meet coworkers. Mary Jo Pilecki, a friend I'd trained years ago, was overseeing a project there but was set to begin maternity leave soon. Knowing her impending absence, I reviewed her documentation for her replacement. As I expected, Mary Jo had everything under control. After dinner with Mary Jo and her husband Wednesday evening and a Thursday morning team meeting, I flew back and arrived at the office by 1:45 p.m. I updated my boss, Mr. Strickland, on the situation in Baton Rouge, recommended tighter oversight, and briefed him on Mary Jo's team. He agreed with my suggestions and told me to take the rest of the day off after filing my expense report. Once I finished the report, I texted my wife, Reagan, to let her know I'd be home early. Just as I was about to leave, Ethan Gardner, my best friend since childhood and a coworker, walked into my office and closed the door. "Hey, Trent, how was the trip?" Ethan asked. "Long but productive," I replied. "Etherly should manage if he stays on top of things, but honestly, I'm beat, and Mr. Strickland told me to head out early." Ethan's expression turned serious. I joked, "Relax, Ethan, I'm not fired. I just need a break after this trip. I'm planning to grab flowers and wine to surprise Reagan. Anything work-related can wait." Ethan interrupted. "Trent, this isn't about work. It's about Reagan." Panic gripped me. "What's wrong with her?" He hesitated before blurting out, "She's messing around while you're traveling." I stared at him in disbelief. Reagan had always been honest about her free-spirited past, but she left that behind when we committed to each other. "That's not funny, Ethan. I don't appreciate it. You should leave and rethink our friendship." Ethan sighed. "I know it's not funny, Trent, but I think it's true. I heard it from Jake Campbell, who heard it from Clay, whose friend was involved with her. Apparently, he wasn't the only one. And that's why it got out." Furious, I snapped. "It's not true. Don't repeat this nonsense. If you do, I'll make sure you regret it." Ethan, clearly upset, handed me a card. "I wouldn't tell you if I wasn't certain. Here's the number for a private investigator my cousin used. If you don't believe me, let her confirm it." He left, leaving me seething, torn between disbelief in his claims and anger at the betrayal of trust. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the rush of blood pounding in my temples. It didn't fully work, but it helped me focus. Ethan was my best friend since childhood, ever since his family moved in next door. We'd always been close. In high school, I was the athlete who pulled us out of trouble when his calm reasoning didn't work. He was the nerd who kept us out of trouble when my temper flared. Even though we went to different colleges, we stayed in touch. And 6 years ago, I helped him get a job at my firm. We'd been co-workers ever since, during my entire relationship with Reagan. As angry as I was about Ethan's accusations, I knew he wasn't trying to hurt me. He genuinely believed what he was saying and thought he was protecting me. "Your cousin's wife, was she really cheating?" I asked. Ethan grimaced. "Yeah, he divorced her, but they still see each other for the kids. He loves them, or he'd have destroyed her by now." Apologizing again, he took a call and left me to process everything. Alone, I mulled over his accusations. While I felt sorry for Ethan's cousin, my heart went out to the kids. They hadn't chosen their parents or the mess they were born into. It struck me harder because Reagan and I were planning to start a family, hoping for at least 2 kids, maybe 3. I tried to brush off Ethan's claims on the drive home, but the thought lingered, gnawing at me. I couldn't believe it. I refused to believe it. Still, it was hard to shake how serious Ethan seemed. When I considered telling Reagan, I decided against it. Why upset her over a lie? After a quick grocery stop, I walked in, and she greeted me with her usual warmth, throwing her arms around me. "You're home early," she exclaimed before kissing me. "I missed you too," I said, smiling. Watching her, I thought about how ridiculous the rumor was. Reagan loved me. She'd never cheat. Still, I couldn't ignore that Ethan genuinely believed what he said. I needed to clear this up, not to prove anything to myself, but to protect our friendship. That night, after Reagan fell asleep, I lay awake, wrestling with how to handle it. By Friday morning, I had a plan. I'd hire the private investigator Ethan recommended, not to catch Reagan in anything but to prove her innocence. I called Donna Hightower's office and scheduled the first available appointment for Monday afternoon. Using my private investment account, I planned to pay for the investigation quietly, ensuring Reagan never found out about the rumor or my steps to dispel it. When Miss Hightower confirmed what I already knew, I'd be able to put the whole mess to rest, for Ethan's sake and mine. At 2 o'clock, I was escorted to a conference room by a secretary where a tall, elegant black woman stood to greet me. She wore tailored black slacks, a crisp white blouse, and a red scarf. "Good afternoon, Mr. Giro. I'm Donna Hightower. How can we help you?" she said with a firm handshake. Her website indicated she was a retired police officer in her mid-50s, though she appeared younger. Her warm smile contrasted with her sharp, observant gaze. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice. I'm Trent Dro. My problem is straightforward. I travel often for work, and someone spread a rumor that my wife is cheating. I want you to prove it's not true." Miss Hightower listened intently as I explained the situation. Her questions were insightful, focusing on details about the allegation and my wife Reagan, including her past relationships. When she finally set her pen down, she asked, Mr. Dro, how familiar are you with philosophy, the legal system, and the concept of the burden of proof? Caught off guard, I admitted. Not very, she explained. Proving a negative, like your wife never cheating, is nearly impossible. I can observe her for a set time and verify her actions, but I can't confirm she hasn't done something in the past. However, under the right circumstances, we can infer patterns and behaviors that might support her innocence. I understood the limits of what she could offer, but decided to move forward, spending hours with her team detailing Reagan's habits and planning how to proceed. The first step came on a hot Sunday after a circuit breaker tripped in our home. By the afternoon, the house was noticeably warmer, and Reagan complained. I went downstairs to check the breaker, but couldn't fix the issue. I'll call the HVAC service, I told her. Please do, she replied, annoyed. I dialed the HVAC service number, let the automated system play out, and then hung up. Next, I called the number Hightower had provided. Hello, this is Trent Dro. The AC isn't working. Can you send someone over? I asked. Tomorrow morning at 10, the voice on the other end replied. Thanks, that'll work, I said. Reagan overheard and smirked. Looks like we're sleeping in the guest room tonight, like a hotel stay, she joked. I smiled back, knowing this setup was part of the investigation. I felt better than I had since Ethan handed me the ridiculous accusation. There was no way Reagan could love me so deeply and still betray me like that. Monday morning, Reagan asked me to toss the sheets in the wash before my shower. I worked from home that day to meet the HVAC technician, a subcontractor recommended by Hightower's investigation service. At 10 a.m., he arrived, installed discrete motion-activated cameras, and explained their capabilities. They could record everything needed for legal purposes, but were subtle enough to go unnoticed. I paid him, thanked him, and went back to work. That evening, I told Reagan about my extended work trip to Tampa and Orlando, explaining I wouldn't return until late Friday. I'll miss you, she said, smiling as she led me to the couch. I love you, Trent. I love you too, I replied, confident in our marriage despite the baseless rumors. In Tampa, meetings went smoothly, and I resolved minor issues in Orlando. My on-site presence helped keep the team on track. Though I could have flown back early, I didn't try. Reagan wasn't expecting me until Friday night, giving her the full opportunity for surveillance. I used the extra time to work and visited a local tool range, renting a couple of pistols to unwind. Friday night traffic was brutal, but I was relieved to finally reach home. Reagan greeted me warmly, bringing me a beer as we relaxed on the couch. Her love and care erased the stress of the week. Saturday, Reagan went to the gym while I tackled yard work. Afterward, I checked my email and was relieved to find nothing unusual. On Sunday afternoon, while Reagan ran errands, I checked again and found a message from Hightower's team, a vague update about my order being ready. My hands shook as I deleted it. When Reagan returned, she noticed I wasn't myself. Are you okay? She asked. I'm not feeling great, I replied, avoiding her kisses. Let me make dinner while you rest. She hugged me, and I caught a floral scent that wasn't her usual shampoo or perfume. It lingered in my mind as I lay awake that night. Could it just be from a store? I didn't want to doubt her, but the scent and the message unsettled me deeply. Something felt off, even though I desperately wanted to believe there was nothing to worry about. I arrived at Miss Hightower's office Monday morning, just before 11 a.m. She greeted me in the same conference room as before, gesturing for me to sit. Mr. Giro, we've concluded our investigation ahead of schedule, but I'm afraid I have bad news. She slid a file across the table. I opened it, skipping the report and going straight to the photos. My world shattered. There was Reagan in our bedroom with a man, then another photo. A different man, still in our bedroom. We documented her with 3 men in 4 encounters through Saturday and Sunday, Miss Hightower said. One meeting even took place at a private home. Stunned, I muttered. But she went shopping yesterday. She did, Miss Hightower replied. After meeting one of her lovers on Saturday, she ran errands. On Sunday, she only went to the grocery store. Receipts or credit card records could confirm it if she didn't use cash. I whispered, she said she was going to the gym on Saturday. Miss Hightower shook her head. Judging by the hotel photos, she was doing something gymnastic, but not at a real gym. Anger replaced disbelief. In our bed? Yes, twice during your trip. She even changed the sheets between lovers. She's careful about appearances, likely to avoid leaving evidence. I clenched my fists. And the flowers? Her hair smelled of flowers. Did she shower after seeing them? Possibly, or she may have used a spray. She's meticulous, but her actions are deliberate, Miss Hightower said. Based on her behavior, she might have a condition like hypersexuality disorder, though I'm no psychiatrist. As I flipped through the file, I froze at a photo of one of the men. I think she works with him. Miss Hightower nodded. That's Noah Woolliver, 32, married, and likely her boss. He has no criminal record but unpaid parking tickets. They met at a bar Wednesday, then went to your house. On Saturday, they met at a hotel and Sunday at his residence. She added, if Mrs. Woolliver had arrived minutes earlier, things might have gotten messy. I sighed. Reagan once told me she was wild in college, but had changed. She said she wanted to settle down and loved me. I believed her. My voice faltered, and Miss Hightower patted my arm gently. I stared at the photo of Noah Woolliver, anger boiling inside me. My mind raced with thoughts of what I wanted to do to this lying, cheating man. Miss Hightower firmly grabbed my arm, forcing me to meet her eyes. Mr. Giro, I'm deeply sorry, but don't let your pain drive you to act out of character. Many people seek revenge when hurt like this, but going too far could ruin your life. Jail, losing your job, and destroying your future won't fix this. It's her mistake, not yours. I nodded reluctantly, though my mind was swirling. I wouldn't let anger consume me, but I'd make her pay, carefully. Don't worry, Miss Hightower, I'll stay in control, but she'll feel every ounce of the pain she caused me. She sighed, but didn't argue further. Just be careful. Don't let this come back to haunt you. She referred me to her uncle, George C. Godwin, a seasoned divorce attorney. I spent hours at Piedmont Park planning my next steps before meeting him. George was the opposite of his niece. Short, jovial, and informal, but just as sharp. He reviewed the evidence and quickly got to work. This is solid, George said, impressed with Miss Hightower's thoroughness. I'll have everything ready by next Monday, but expedited work will cost extra. Do it, I replied. I also outlined a specific request for my case. George warned me to tread carefully, noting that appearances matter in court as much as the law. I agreed, forcing a weak smile. Late Monday night, I arrived home, feigning illness to avoid Reagan. I showered and tried to block her from my mind, focusing instead on the steps ahead. Tuesday morning, I quietly left for a flight to Charlotte. Thursday night, I made a difficult call. Ethan, it's Trent. I owe you a huge apology. You were right. I was completely wrong. She played me. Ethan forgave me instantly, offering his support. I spent Friday avoiding Reagan, pretending to be too tired to engage. On Saturday, I went to my parents' house to help with a project, using it as an excuse to get away. Though I wanted to tell my dad everything, I held back, knowing it wasn't the right time. I would wait until the dust settled, ensuring my plans stayed on track. Late Saturday night, I called Reagan to let her know I wouldn't be home until Sunday afternoon. Her tone made it clear she wasn't home, and likely not alone. I kept my cool, ending the call with a fake love you. On Sunday afternoon, while Reagan was out, likely with one of her lovers, I got a text from Mr. Godwin confirming everything was ready. The bailiff would serve her papers at 11 a.m. Monday as requested and notify me once it was done. I left a note for Reagan saying I had work to handle and drove to my office, finalizing my plans. She called twice, and I lied, saying I'd be late but promised we'd spend Monday night together. She sounded thrilled and confessed her love, a bitter irony I ignored. That night, I quietly slipped into bed knowing it would be the last time. The next morning, after she left for work, I labeled my belongings with painter's tape, marking what was mine. Anything else I planned to leave behind or donate. At 8 a.m., Ethan arrived with movers. I packed while Ethan supervised the crew, ensuring all my possessions were loaded onto the truck for storage. I discreetly moved my firearms to my dad's safe earlier, ensuring nothing of value was left behind. When Reagan's friend Amy noticed the moving truck, I quickly intercepted her. Shh, it's a surprise, I said with a grin. I'm swapping out old furniture for our upcoming anniversary. Don't mention it to Reagan until she tells you herself. Amy smiled, agreeing to keep the secret. By noon, rumors would likely spread, but by then, it wouldn't matter. I tipped the movers generously, thanked Ethan, and headed to the bank. I withdrew half of our joint account funds and deposited them into a new account I'd set up. Then I closed our shared credit card, ensuring a clean financial break. At 10:45 a.m., I parked in a Sandy Springs lot and prepared to send my carefully drafted email. The process server texted updates as Reagan arrived at her office. At 11 a.m., the papers were served. I uploaded the email to our shared family account and sent it to friends and family. It announced our separation and included 3 photos showing Reagan and Noah together. Time-stamped for clarity. To avoid going too far, I cropped and blurred the photos to keep them appropriate but undeniable. The message didn't go to Reagan or Noah. I wanted them blindsided. Satisfied everything was in order, I logged out, closed my laptop, and sat back. The storm I'd planned had begun. At 11:30, Reagan called, her voice panicked. "Trent, what's this about a divorce? Why? I thought we were happy. Did you find someone else?" I laughed bitterly. "Happy? I thought so too, until I found out what you were doing. Check the back of the envelope in the package from my lawyer." I heard her swearing and pleading, insisting she loved me, just as she had in front of God and everyone at our wedding 5 years ago. "Trent, it's not what it looks like," she shouted. "Really? No," I replied. "Let me explain," she begged. "Not interested. My attorney's contact info is in the packet. Talk to him." I hung up mid-sentence and ignored her repeated calls. She left voicemails and texts filled with denials and excuses. Without reading or listening, I deleted them all, then blocked her number. Next, I called her father. "Hi, Bob. It's Trent. I hate to bother you at work, but this is important. I wanted you to hear it from me first. The marriage is over," I said. I heard him gulp. "What happened, son?" "Reagan's broken her vows. I have proof. Dates, times, photos, and video. It's been eliminating me, but I can't trust her anymore. The papers were filed this morning, and she's been served." "No, I can't believe it," Bob replied, his voice trembling. "She promised me she was past all this." "She promised all of us, Bob. But she broke those promises. I loved her deeply, but it's over. I wanted to tell you personally because I respect you and Chessie." Bob expressed deep regret and heartbreak over what Reagan had done. We ended the call on somber terms. I left a voicemail for Chessie, suspecting Bob had already called her. By 11:16, it was time for the next part of my plan, a step I had debated but ultimately decided to follow through on. Disguised with sunglasses, a baseball cap, and a fake delivery lanyard, I headed into a building, gum in my mouth for extra flair. At the security desk, I introduced myself. "Hi, TC Dro from Sunshine Couriers. I've got a special package for Mrs. Melissa Wooliver," I said. The guard frowned. "Packages go to the receiving center downstairs." "Not this one. Court rules require personal ID and a signature. I can keep it quiet, or we can make a scene. Your choice," I responded. The guard hesitated. "What do you want?" "I just need to meet her in the lobby, get her ID and signature, and be out in 5 minutes. No hassle," I said. Reluctantly, he nodded. "You'll need a visitor pass, and I'll hold your ID until you return it." I handed over my driver's license, received the badge, and headed upstairs, my plan perfectly in motion. I headed to the elevator, chewing gum, and once on the 3rd floor, approached the front desk at Melissa Wooliver's firm. After some hesitation, the receptionist summoned her. I tossed my gum, removed my cap, and stored it in my bag, shedding any remnants of my disguise. Melissa arrived, her concerned expression betraying unease. She was a striking woman, likely in her late 20s or early 30s, with tanned skin and deep brown eyes. "Joan said you have something for me to sign," she said hesitantly. "No signature is required, Mrs. Wooliver. I'm Trent Giroux, and I'm here because your husband has been having an affair with my wife." I handed her a cropped photo of them in bed. "This envelope contains proof, dates, times, photos, and confirmation from private investigators." Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "It has to be fake. Noah promised me." "It's not fake," I said quietly. "I hired professionals to investigate rumors about my wife. They confirmed the affair and gathered undeniable evidence." Still crying, she leaned into me. "He said the first time was a mistake, that it wouldn't happen again. We worked through it." "How could he do this again?" "I can't say why," I replied. "But it wasn't a one-time mistake. They met 3 times in 5 days." She clung to my shirt, shaking her head as the betrayal sank in. After a moment, she stepped back, wiping her tear-streaked cheeks. "I gave him another chance, but this is it. It's over. We'll end up in court. I've included a recommendation for a private investigator and an attorney in the envelope. They've been a great help to me." She nodded, took the envelope, and started to leave, but stopped. "Mr. Giroux, can I call you if I need advice?" "My number is in the envelope," I replied. After leaving, I visited the testing lab recommended by Miss Hightower, anxious about the risks Reagan had exposed me to. For days, as I managed a project in South Georgia, I couldn't escape the fear of a possible STD. By week's end, relief finally came. The lab confirmed I was clean. Grateful to have avoided that fallout, my anger toward Reagan deepened for the reckless risks she'd taken for meaningless flings. Reagan kept trying to contact me. leaving voicemail after voicemail on my work and cell phones, even using other numbers. I deleted each one as soon as I heard her voice, but she didn't take the hint. By Friday morning, more messages had piled up. After deleting them, I blocked her number. Over the weekend, I visited my parents, only to find she'd been contacting them too. My mom, upset and knowing we'd planned to have kids, begged me to reconsider the divorce. I shook my head and showed her a cropped photo with a timestamp. Tears ran down her face as she hugged my dad, finally understanding. I left them and returned to my temporary living arrangements. At work the next day, Andy Smith burst into my office before noon. "Trent, Mary Jo Bilecki's water broke early. What do we do?" Andy was supposed to cover Mary Jo's leave, but his current project wasn't ready to wrap up. After reviewing schedules, we proposed that I take over the New Orleans job, allowing Andy to focus on his project. Mr. Strickland agreed, and by evening I was en route to New Orleans, distancing myself further from Reagan. Mary Jo and her newborn twins were reported to be doing well. The next day, I met with subcontractors and reviewed plans at the job site before visiting Mary Jo in the hospital. I gave her a small gift and congratulated her. Seeing her twins on the NICU monitor brought me joy, but also sorrow, as I realized I might never have children of my own. I buried those thoughts and threw myself into the project. By Friday, I took the team out for drinks in the French Quarter to unwind. On Monday, George Godwin called to update me on the divorce, sharing that Reagan was bombarding his office with increasingly hysterical calls. "Are you sure you don't want to talk to her?" he asked, laughing at my sarcastic response. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. "Hey Trent, my lawyer filed the paperwork and Noah has been served. Can we talk? Melissa W." I texted back, and moments later, my phone rang. "Thanks for talking, Trent," Melissa said. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "It's hard, but I'll get through it," she replied, her voice wavering. She thanked me for revealing the affair and stopping her from acting on anger. "You could have taken advantage of me when I was vulnerable, but you didn't. You made me pause and think." We were both hurting, Melissa. Acting on those feelings wouldn't have helped either of us, I said. We talked briefly before wishing each other luck. While I empathized with her pain, I knew my focus needed to remain on moving forward and dealing with the fallout in my own way. Work in New Orleans was going well, but I was still overseeing the Baton Rouge project and advising on others. It felt like I was in a swamp, overwhelmed by everything. 2 weeks later, George called. "Reagan's lawyer wants a consultation with the judge. If it happens, you'll need to meet with her in Atlanta." "What do you want me to do?" George asked. I was furious, but George had warned me this could happen. "We didn't include all the evidence of her infidelity. What if the judge sees it?" I replied. "We'll have to give it to her lawyer, but Judge Johnson might cancel the request. If not, we'll warn him first," George said. A week later, Reagan's request for counseling was denied, although the judge suggested she might need counseling for sexual dependence. That was one problem down. For the next few months, I kept a low profile, unsure if Reagan had hired someone to find me. I updated my will and life insurance to ensure she wouldn't benefit if anything happened to me. Meanwhile, I visited Mary Jo and Ozzy's newborn twins, helping out with babysitting and enjoying the time spent with them. I prayed for children of my own, though I hoped they'd come one at a time. Melissa Wooliver also reached out several times, offering support during my own difficult time. But I kept our interactions strictly platonic due to legal and personal boundaries. As things improved for Melissa, her messages stopped. I bought a house in Dunwoody, using funds from my pre-Regan account, just before Mary Jo returned to work after her maternity leave. The twins were thriving, but I knew I would miss seeing them grow. When MJ returned to work, it marked the end of my unofficial babysitting role. I'd grown attached to the twins, and caring for them reminded me of my own unfulfilled desire for children, a pain caused by Reagan's betrayal. Back in Atlanta, the divorce dragged on. George assured me Judge Johnson was as frustrated as I was and that the end was near. I moved into my new home, unpacked, and met a few neighbors, including a divorced woman, Noel. While she invited me for dinner, I politely declined, still bound by the ongoing divorce and cautious about the legal implications. Ethan, who had no clue about the Georgia court system, didn't quite get it. After I returned to Atlanta, he asked, "When are you going to start dating again?" "When the judge finalizes my divorce and I know anything I do won't affect the settlement with Reagan," I replied. "So, it's going to be a while. How's she doing?" Ethan asked. "I don't know, and I don't care," I said. "You still owe her," he pointed out. "I know," I replied, "and she'll get what's coming to her when the time's right." By April, Judge Johnson had had enough of the delays. He ordered both of us to appear in court for closing statements. I arrived early and waited for George when I saw Reagan approaching. "Trent, this isn't how it was supposed to be," she said. "I know, but you didn't keep your vows, so this is how it is," I responded. "You were gone so much?" she argued. "That's nonsense," I shot back. "You knew my schedule when we married. When I went over it, I made up for it. You didn't. You made up for it with your boss and other men while I was away, and after I returned," her eyes filled with tears and her face reddened. "But I had needs." She noticed people watching us and asked, "Can we talk somewhere else?" "No need," I said. "We talked about all this before. You promised you'd stop your wandering and wanted a family. You got married, but you failed. Get over it." I did. Or get another therapist. She recoiled from my words, clearly upset. I turned and left her standing there, still in tears, as George walked toward me. "Trent, please," she called out. But George and I entered the courtroom. Judge Johnson insisted we be there when the divorce was finalized, likely to keep Reagan from stalling. He noted that it was the first time he'd seen us together, which set her off. She cried, but he silenced her before delivering the ruling. The gavel fell, ending both the case and our 5-year marriage. Afterward, I shook George's hand and thanked him. As I turned to leave, Reagan rushed toward me, begging, but I ignored her. She started shouting, using profanity. She knew better than to act that way in court, but her anger took over. I'm not sure if the court staff arrested her, but George and I used the moment to slip out. The next day, George filed for a restraining order, which Judge Johnson granted without hesitation. It was a relief. Reagan would stay away, and I didn't have to deal with her anymore. Part of me hoped she'd resist, maybe even end up in jail for a short time. But she was too smart for that. She disappeared from my life for good. The next weekend, I began dating again, reconnecting with Noel for a rescheduled date. She was nice, but it quickly became clear that we didn't have much in common, except for a lengthy dry spell. When I drove her home, she invited me inside, and I didn't resist. A few moments later, we were in her bedroom. After the second time, we both smiled, and Noel curled up next to me. "Trent, we can do this again sometime if you want," she said, confirming my suspicion from dinner that she wasn't looking for anything long-term or permanent. I thanked her and walked home. A few minutes later, Noel and I stayed casual friends, but never saw each other again. The next weekend, I dated another woman, then another in Birmingham the following week. After each date, I felt devastated, often in more ways than one, realizing that despite the enjoyment, I was no closer to finding the right woman. I wanted a friend, a lover, and a lifelong partner with whom I could eventually start a family. Over the next 2 months, I began to doubt whether this would ever happen or if I'd ever find lasting happiness. However, short-term happiness came often and was enjoyable until Independence Day weekend, when I visited my parents and spent time with my sister, her husband, and their 4 children. Mom, knowing me better than I realized, told me that day, "You'll probably never give your dad and me grandchildren if you don't change something." "I know, Mom. I bought a house and I'm fixing it up," I replied. "Trent, a house isn't a home yet. A man and a good woman, not one of those strumpets you've been dating, can make it a home if they work at it. Son, you need to find a good woman." "I know that, Mom, and someday I will. I'll find her. Just give me time." She hummed. "If we give you more time, your father and I will be dead by then and never meet our grandchildren." She was partly teasing, but it still made me think. One evening in late July, I got a text. "Hi, Trent, it's Melissa Willever. Can you talk sometime when you have a minute?" Honestly, I was surprised to hear from her after all this time. I finished cleaning the paint sprayer and replied quickly, asking her to call when she could. A few minutes later, she called. "Hey, Trent, thanks for agreeing to talk to me," Melissa said. "No problem, Melissa. How are you? We haven't talked in a while, and that's partly why I was hesitant to message you tonight. I wasn't sure if, with everything that's happened, you'd want to talk again," I replied. I laughed. "Unless you were actively involved in getting my ex-wife and your husband." "Ex-husband as of today," she cut in. "Together, then I don't blame you for what happened between them or the mess they made. So I've got no reason not to talk." "Good, because I swear I had nothing to do with it," she said. "And I didn't think you did. So what's going on?" I asked. "Well, it took longer than expected, but like I said, I'm finally free. I even got my maiden name back, Ortiz, and I wanted to thank you. You opened my eyes to what the idiot was doing, gave me evidence for free so I didn't have to spend money I couldn't afford. and gave me advice. I went to another lawyer, but you really helped me, Trent, and I'm grateful, she explained. You're welcome. So don't think about it anymore, okay? I said. It's hard, Trent, because you were my guiding light, my inspiration when I was so low and depressed. I don't know you well, but I like what I've seen so far, so I'm going to take a chance and do something I've never done before. Won't you have dinner with me? She asked. The dinner was wonderful, but I spent the whole night thinking about how sweet and beautiful she was, and what kind of ex-husband the world's biggest idiot would have to be to leave her, rather than focusing on what we were eating. Reagan was just as beautiful, with her own special kind of sexuality, but after discovering her hidden dark side, the side that would betray the man she was supposed to love above all others, her former score of 11 dropped to negative numbers in my eyes. You're staring, Melissa said with a smirk, almost as much as I do. I grinned and nodded. It's fun to focus when you've got someone so nice to focus on. She blushed and covered her mouth to hide how much she liked my compliment. You want to get out of here and maybe come back to my place? I think I'd like that, she whispered. Please, Trent, take me home or somewhere. Now. I need it, and I can't wait. A few minutes later, as we turned onto her street, she reached into her purse and pulled out her cell phone. Pull into the garage, she said. The door's open. That night, we didn't leave the bed except for drinks or bathroom breaks. I was grateful it was a Saturday as I didn't have to work, because I could have stayed with her forever. She fell asleep after our morning date, and I sighed in relief before heading to the bathroom. As I stepped out, the morning sunlight poured through the open curtain, and I finally got a good look at her bedroom. Our clothes were scattered all over the floor, and I smiled at the memory of our passion. The double bed was the only thing I recognized, along with her pile of pillows, some of which had been knocked to the floor. The TV sat on a stand beside the chair, angled so she could watch it from bed, but it was Melissa's dresser that grabbed my attention. There were several photos on it, and I quickly glanced at them before something made me stop. It might have been rude, but I picked up one of the pictures to examine it closer. Trent, what are you doing? Melissa asked from the bed. Melissa, who's the girl in these photos? I asked, holding up the picture. That's my daughter, Ansley. She's 3, and she means the world to me, Melissa replied. Her words caught me off guard, actually shocked me. And I said, You never mentioned her. I didn't want to bring her into the Noah situation, so I tried to keep her out of it. But she ended up being a huge obstacle in the divorce. That's why it took so long. Trent, I don't want us to be seeing each other until we're sure there's something real between us, she explained. Where is she now? I tried to keep my voice steady, but I'm sure it went up a little. She's with him this weekend. Why? Is something wrong? Melissa asked. I liked her a lot, but this was a shock, a real surprise, and the implications, though unclear at the moment, hit me. Melissa, I don't know. I really like you. I like you more than I should. But if there's one person I don't love as much as my ex-wife, it's your ex-husband. It's the same situation either way. That's what my grandmother would have called this match. I've already told you I want kids, so you can imagine I'd want to be involved in your daughter's life if things worked out, I said. But think about this. If I show up at her soccer game, piano recital, cheerleading practice, school dance, or whatever, who else will be there? Noah, she sighed, starting to grasp what I was getting at. He's a lying, cheating idiot, but he loves her. Exactly. And every time I see him at one of those events, it'll remind me of what he did to my ex and the role he played in destroying my marriage. I'll resent him, and I think Ansley, even though she won't understand, will sense the tension between us. Eventually, she'll start resenting me, which will hurt my relationship with her, and in turn, hurt our relationship. As much as it pains me to say it, I think it would ruin everything we have. She sat up, and almost in a whisper, she said, You're saying we have no future? As much as I'd like to be wrong, no, I don't think we do. I agreed. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I thought it was too easy, too perfect. Now I know it was. Please, Trent, just go. The garage door will be open for you. She tapped her phone a few times and collapsed back onto the bed, pulling the sheet over herself as she cried. I gathered my clothes and dressed in the hallway as I left, hating myself at every turn, almost as much as I hated her ex-husband. It hurt, but deep down, I knew it was the right decision. Later, I went to my parents' house and gave them the short version. They could tell I was holding back and that I was hurting more than I cared to admit. Mom tried to get more out of me, but I shook my head and told her it wouldn't work. As always, she hugged me, stroked my back, and assured me everything would be okay. I wanted to believe her, but at that moment, I just couldn't. On Sunday, we met my sister and her family for lunch after church. There was a long wait at the restaurant, so she pulled me aside and had me lay it all out. She was 2 years older and had helped me through several high school crushes, so I opened up and told her almost everything, though I left out the details, though I suspected she had a hunch. "I know it's not going to be easy," she said later, "but I think you can make it work if you really love her. One date doesn't tell you everything, and if you had more, you might realize it's not as big as you think. But it might also show you there's something there worth fighting for." Thanks, sis. And you're right. One date doesn't say it all, but it told me enough to know it would hurt a lot more to get close to her and then watch it fall apart because of the past. Listen, little brother, you won't know for sure until you try. I nodded and agreed to think it over. After that, our table was ready, and we didn't talk about it again, but it stayed in my mind on the trip home and the days that followed. Ethan understood me better than anyone and agreed with my thoughts. But on the drive home from a trip to a factory near LaGrange, I started to wonder, given how lucky Ethan was with women, was it really a good thing that he was agreeing with me? The weekend after I returned, Ethan set us up with a couple of women. We had fun, but the thought of Reagan still lingered. During the divorce, Reagan wanted to keep the house, but I made sure she had to sell it, forcing her to give up more than she wanted. It was petty, but it felt like karma, and I didn't regret it. I also had George handle the sale, as he and Reagan's lawyer were on good terms. He found out Reagan planned to buy a condo, and I later heard rumors that she and Noah were getting married. Concerned, I called George. "Reagan might be remarrying," I said. "I'll check it out and stop the alimony payments if it's true," George replied. During the divorce, George argued I shouldn't pay alimony due to Reagan's infidelity, but the judge awarded her a small amount for 5 years, or until remarried. If she remarried, "I'll confirm and get the payments stopped," George said. "Some people never learn," I said, shocked that she and Noah might be together. This only reinforced my decision to cut things off with Melissa. George laughed. "It keeps me in business." After hearing about Reagan and Noah's wedding, I decided to reach out to Will Kleiner, a friend from college who worked at Reagan's firm. Will and I had stayed in touch after I started dating Reagan. I met with him for lunch, and when I mentioned what happened, he said, "I heard Woollever asked to transfer. It all makes sense now." I asked about the firm's policy on these matters. "Violating it could get them in big trouble," Will replied. I asked him to get me a copy of the personnel manual, and he agreed. A few days later, at a Braves game, Will handed me a flash drive with the information I needed. I brought it to George, who reviewed it. "Even if you prove they knew about Noah's actions," George said, "you can't sue. Georgia's laws don't allow it. The state removed alienation of affection in '79. I cursed under my breath. I just wanted to hit them where it hurts. "Many have tried. Unless the firm knew about the misuse and did nothing, you won't get far," George said. "But let's focus on spousal support first. We'll handle the other later." The next week, George filed a motion to end spousal support after discovering Reagan had remarried. Reagan's attorney opposed it, but the judge agreed with us, and the payments were stopped. "Patience," George advised. 6 months later, George called. "Noah's cautious right now. You're right to wait. Let's run a check now while the marriage is still fresh." It took 2 weeks, but Donna Hightower and one of her investigators proved that, as the saying goes, tigers don't change their stripes, or in this case, leopards don't change spots. Serial cheaters don't stop cheating. Noah Woollever had started an affair with one of his new subordinates. So George took the information, packaged it neatly, and went to one of his lawyer friends. "We don't want this coming back to you, Trent, because if whoever takes over Judge Johnson's position sees your involvement, Mr. Woollever could lose his job. If that happens, Mrs. Woollever could petition to have spousal support reinstated because of the impact your actions have had on her current husband. I'm not sure how she'd find out since I'm not going to tell her. And if anything happens to Noah, I bet he won't tell her the real reason." George smirked and wiggled his finger at me. Sneaky, sneaky. And it was. George's lawyer friend delivered the package to Noah's firm. Through my friend Will, I later learned that Noah had been escorted out by security the same day, and rumors were circulating that he wouldn't be coming back. It said that Reagan cried when she found out, asking why, but no one would tell her. "Take that, a-hole," I said after our conversation ended. "If I keep this up, I might become a bitter old man." Grinning to myself, I realized that was a risk I was willing to take. Not wanting to connect my name to it in case Reagan found out and took it to court to try to get her spousal support reinstated, I sent the package anonymously. That same day, the next evening, I got a call. "Trent," Melissa Ortiz shouted, "I know you probably never want to talk to me again, but I had to call and tell you. Noah called last night saying he'd been laid off from the firm due to downsizing and that he was going to file for a reduction in child support because of it. I called a friend at the firm and heard the rumors, and today I got an express package. Anonymous, of course, which probably explains everything and should help keep my spousal support payments the same when Noah files his petition. Trent, I think I know who I need to thank for this. So to that person, I say thank you." I chuckled. If you talk to the right person, they might just say you're very welcome if they could admit to it. As for what was in the package, well, some people never learn. I'm sure Noah will spin a sad story to the judge, and when my lawyer presents that information, I hope the judge uses those exact words against him. After all, he just remarried. "I wonder if he jumped into another affair that quickly when we got married," Melissa mused. "Don't think so. It's in the past, so leave it there. Just smile and enjoy life, okay? You deserve it." We said goodbye, probably for the last time. I smiled, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. I'd gone through the ordeal. I'd survived, and while some might disagree, I had returned as much hell and heartache as Reagan and Noah had put me through, pushing as far as I dared, but not too far. While she was probably cheating again too, I had helped Reagan end up in a much worse financial position, in an apartment instead of a nice house, with a dysfunctional husband who paid alimony and child support through the nose. Plus, I knew she was in a relationship with a spouse who cheated regularly, but didn't bother to tell her, just as she hadn't told me about what she'd done. I had tried to give her the best and make her happy, but now I suspected she had more problems than she could handle. Yes, I had struck back at both of them, but I regretted nothing. Not a single thing. Moreover, as I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized I no longer thought of them with those harsh names that once filled my mind. Having received my revenge, I no longer cared what they thought. And that realization brought the biggest smile of all. But the smile didn't last, because in the following weeks I made another discovery, the hardest one of all. As much as I thought I'd gotten over Reagan and Noah, I was surprised to realize they still had power over me. When I thought I might have a chance at happiness with Melissa, I gave it up because of the memories of what my ex and Melissa's ex had done, the awkwardness they had caused both for me and, I'm sure, for her. Since then, I'd gone on a few dates and slept with several women, but once the pleasure faded, I realized more and more that I didn't care about any of it. Melissa, I finally acknowledged, was still in the back of my mind, just as much as Reagan and Noah. Even though I had taken my revenge and gotten my pound of flesh, I still wasn't free from them as long as I cared what they thought about anything. Not until I could look at them and laugh and say, "Look at what you gave up and what I might get because of it. Thank you for being so stupid." Then I would truly be free. At that moment, everything became clear, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I picked up the phone, went through my recent calls, and found the number she had called from the day she received the file on Noah's latest actions. I pressed the number to call back and hoped she would answer. Moments later, she picked up. "Hi, Melissa, it's Trent Giroux. Can we talk?" I asked. "Trent, you've helped me again recently when you didn't have to. I'm listening," she replied. "Something came to me tonight, an epiphany, if you will, and if I'm not too late and you'll let me, I'd like to talk to you about it to see if there's any chance of making a difference," I said. There was silence on the line, though I thought I heard breathing, so I continued. "Even though I told you to let go of the past, I realized that I had been so focused on what had destroyed my life that I didn't see I was looking backward instead of forward. I want to apologize for that. And if you agree, I want a chance to make things right, if you'll let me," I explained. Again, she didn't interrupt me. As I spoke, I could almost hear Melissa nodding her head, considering my words. To my relief, she wasn't dating anyone new, and to my surprise, she agreed to give us a fresh start and see where things went, to see if we could eventually be as compatible as we were that first night. We went on another first date the following weekend with clear intentions of taking things slow, but sometimes things unfold differently. She invited me in. As I walked her to the door, she took the glasses, I poured the wine, and we sat on the couch talking until 11. A few minutes later, I was already carrying her upstairs and gently seating her by the bed. After that, we lay there in silence. It felt too soon, It was only our second first date. But in my heart, I hoped it would work. And from the way she looked at me, I thought she might feel the same. Though we faced some challenges in the following months, we discovered that we agreed on far more important things than we realized. Many little things didn't matter when two people love each other deeply. Even though I thought I just liked her after our second casual date, with each meeting, I found myself liking her more, eventually admitting that it was much more than just liking her. Almost from the start, Melissa came to the same conclusion, and we began to plan and work together for our future. We both wanted that, so we got married. A little over a year later, we decided to try again. When the time came, little Ansley was our flower girl, and Melissa and I said, "I do," and truly meant it. As I expected, we've run into Noah a few times since then, but it hasn't gone the way I initially feared. The first time we were close, he tried to make a snide remark about me taking seconds, but I quickly cut him off in a whisper, just loud enough for him to hear. I said, "Noah, thanks so much for taking Reagan, the cheating hoe, off my hands. If you think she'll be more loyal to you than she was to me, you're even dumber than I thought. And thanks for making it possible for me to be with Melissa, the real woman you couldn't keep faithful to. Believe me, I got the best part of the deal." He almost choked and clenched his fists in anger, but realized I could have easily taken him down if he had touched me. Regaining himself to protect Ansley and me from any damage, he turned and walked over to his young daughter, picked her up, kissed her, whispered something to her, and then set her down, saying goodnight to Melissa. A few months later, he told her he was in the process of divorcing Reagan and had finally realized what I had said was true. When he began to suggest something, she immediately interrupted. "Too bad you didn't realize it until it was too late, Noah. Don't ever bring it up again." Since we've been together, Noah has never said a word to me about it, but I can still see the regret in his eyes whenever he sees us together, and I always smile, enjoying the present. Ansley is 6 now, and she's at Grandma and Grandpa Ortiz's house, while I'm holding Melissa's hand, her fingers gripping mine like there's no tomorrow. When the doctor gives the signal, Melissa pushes one last time. Finally, she leans back, and I kiss her sweat-drenched forehead as the doctor and nurse step back a little from the bed. After a moment, the midwife looks at us and smiles. "Mr. and Mrs. Giroux, congratulations. I know you didn't want to know beforehand, so let me be the first to tell you that you have a beautiful baby boy." And that's when I realized all the trials and struggles I had endured were worth it. I knew that no matter how hard it had been, I wouldn't change a thing.